Hey, what's up, guys? Welcome to Law-Splaining the Interwebs. I'm your host, Nick Rekieta of Rekieta Law, a small law firm in central Minnesota. And with me today is an absolute legend, Karl Jobst. How's it going, man?
Hello, hello. Very good, thank you. Thanks for having me on. I
Yeah.
really appreciate the opportunity.
Oh, I'm glad you commented on the video because I'm always looking to talk to different people just in general, but certainly on subjects that we're covering on the show. And of course, one lawsuit that I've been following, not as close as some others, but I do try and get the major updates, is the Billy Mitchell lawsuit, because I find the whole topic really, really interesting, and it covers something that we're kind of familiar with here in my audience, which is defamation lawsuits, and specifically in like this weird world of internet and e-celebrity that's going on.
What's interesting, I think it might be a lawyer thing. Whereas I think if it was anyone else who read my comment, they might have sort of attacked back instead of taking it really bad. But I think lawyers have a generally thicker skin. They're sort of used to that, maybe,
Well,
because you took it like really well, and you're just like, yeah, well, if you've got disagreements, that's fine. Let's have a talk about it.
well, some I can't speak for all lawyers because a lot of them are quick to kind of argue and fire back. But the way I look at internet communication is like it's so one way. Because like if you're watching a video that I do, there's no real way for you to say, oh, okay, wait a minute, what about this? What about this? So I try and take things in relatively good faith, unless they're obviously bad. But no,
Yeah.
I was happy that you commented and happy to talk about it. So thank you for agreeing to come on the show. Um, we've got a bunch to cover. You sent me a list of things that you'd like to touch on.
hmm
I read
Yes.
through it. It all looks really interesting. And one thing I want to start by fluffing you a little bit is that one thing I've noticed about both your videos and even just the prep for this one is you seem like a very analytical and thorough guy who puts stuff together
hmm
really, really well. So thank you
Yes.
for that.
That's right. Yeah, very, very logical. One thing I can't stand, especially when it comes to the Mitchell stuff, is just people going on about their opinions, and gossip and all the stuff that can't be substantiated by like hard evidence. So when I look at things, it's what can I verify? That's what I'm more interested in than anything else.
Right. And especially with stuff like this, because if you've got someone who has done something wrong, for example, like I'll assume arguendo that Billy has done the bad thing, that he has cheated in various ways. And there seems to be a lot of evidence supporting that. So I'm not out to deny it or anything. And I'm hoping you'll help like kind of educate me on that aspect of it, because
hmm
what I can decipher is the legal terminology, what's going on in the case. What I can't do is speak to the evidence, because we're talking about MAME emulators or MAME or whatever. I don't even know the correct pronunciation. So very non-expert.
Yeah,
Um,
emulator's fine or MAME. I think
sure.
emulator more people will recognize, but MAME, just saying MAME is
Now,
fine.
so that's one question I have. Are there different types of emulators where the MAME is specific? Because one thing I've seen floating around and that Billy asserts in his case
hmm
is
hmm
that the MAME emulator, or whatever that he's accused of using, didn't exist at the time the videos were allegedly made. Um,
Yeah.
so
There are different types of MAME. So, and you can even make a custom emulator.
gotcha.
So, and that's one of the reasons that Twin Galaxies never said specifically, he used MAME, because very well he could have just had someone make a custom emulator
Sure.
specific to that game that he used, and you can't really tell. But in regards to that point about it didn't exist, that's false. Like that's been proven
Gotcha.
totally, totally false. It definitely, the emulators that existed around that time could 100%, has been proven, create the artifacts that are seen in the videotapes.
Gotcha. Okay. See, yeah, and that's the type of stuff that I don't know, and I'm glad to have you on as sort of an expert on that stuff, who's done a ton of research. Like
Mhm.
clearly, I was watching your lawsuit video as we discussed before the show. I was watching it today to try and catch up. Then my kids kind of destroyed my finishing of it, but
Mhm.
watching through that. was helpful in learning about kind of where this is, where all this stuff is
Well,
coming from.
I
So
just want to point out that because the investigation from Twin Galaxies was public, all of the questions that were raised or points that were made before the definitive conclusion were all
right,
public. So
yep,
what the Mitchell camp has done is they've said, "Oh, this point was brought up, and but it was false." But
right,
the thing is, there's probably 100 things that was said before the actual conclusion was made that were proven false or that weren't relevant. It was just more people hashing things out. But he sort of latched onto things that had nothing to do with the conclusion anyway, and said, "Well, you said this, during the investigation, but that ended up being wrong. Ha ha, we got you." Uh, but so I sort of disagree with that method in general. I think
sure.
basically you should just look at the conclusion and the merits of the conclusion and what they've actually said right at the very end of the investigation.
Right. And I in principle I agree, and I'm going to speak in the abstract because I have no idea if this is what's going on in the case, but if I
Mhm.
were building a case for someone in a similar sort of situation, one thing I would be looking for is, are some of the statements that they're latching onto as false, have those statements somehow been endorsed and caused damage? And that might be part of the method to the madness. Not saying it's a
Mhm.
great way to go about the case, if especially if you know that that's not doing it. But if, for example, someone and it would have to be the party, right? Like, so Twin Galaxies would have to, in this case, say one of the false statements, and then a bunch of people latch onto it,
Yes.
even if they tried to correct it later but didn't do it in the right way. You might say that that statement caused damage, and therefore
Yeah.
you could. But again, I don't know if that's gone on here specifically, but that's just a
Well, to
weird
that
sort of,
point,
yeah,
to that point, that's why Twin Galaxies specifically said, we're not saying that he played on this version or that version or did this or did that. All they can say is that what didn't happen.
right,
And what the evidence says is that what didn't happen is that the footage on the videotapes did not come from a original unmodified Donkey Kong board. So that's what
right,
we can say. We can definitely say that, and that's been proven. We can't say exactly the specific technique he used to make it. People have ideas about it could be this or it could be that,
sure,
but that you can't really prove that either way. So that's sort of something that's it's not no use even talking about it. I mean, you can if you're interested in finding out how he did it, but as far as the investigation was concerned, it's only interested in asking, can it be produced by an unmodified board? And the answer is no, and that's it.
right. And I'm hoping you can help me, because as we go, we'll get into this,
Mhm.
but I'm hoping you
Yeah.
can help me like understand how that is, because I've seen stuff about artifacting and stuff, but I think a clear explanation would be really helpful as we go. But first, I've realized that while I assume most of my viewers are actually pretty familiar with you, especially because a whole bunch of people were like, "Yeah, get Karl on the show." There are
Mhm.
some out there who may not be. So if you could go ahead and if we could introduce you a little bit,
Sure, sure,
um,
sure.
that would be fantastic, and it would help me get to know you a little bit more too. Real quick, guys, Karl's uh, channel is linked in the description. If you're not already a subscriber and not familiar with his work, please go check it out, because just watching over the weekend, I've learned a whole bunch about speedrunning, game mechanics, high scores, the nature of competitive video games, and they're great. I also learned that I'm inadequate at Doom. Um, pretty
Yeah,
pretty handily.
yeah.
So,
I've learned that too. So, you know,
yeah,
I
I
do
was.
videos on it, but compared to the top players, I'm terrible.
Who's the guy? Zero, or what?
Zero Master. Yeah,
That
I
dude
did a
is.
whole video on him.
Yeah, that guy's ridiculous.
Mhm.
And he should maybe be put in some sort of cage. I'm kidding. I'm kidding. So yeah, how do we? What's a good like summary of who you are so that we can kind of get to know you, um, a little bit? I guess, how would you describe?
Well, my history in regards to gaming is being a speedrunner. So I've been a speedrunner for 20 years. I've been involved in the community for many, many years. I would consider myself an expert on speedrunning in general, which is what I used to create my YouTube channel, which was just in-depth videos about speedrunning, explaining sort of mechanics or explaining new world records, telling people the intricate details that aren't necessarily evident when you just watch a speedrun or at first glance. So I would just describe myself as a speedrunning journalist who does sort of more produced, in-depth sort of documentaries on world record histories and speedrunning in general. And I'm also interested in just gaming in general as well. So I also investigate gaming achievements or gaming history, and then create produce videos explaining important details.
Right, and they're all really, I mean, they're dramatically well done. So kudos on that. One other thing that I've noticed, and maybe this is just because of my specific sort of tooling around for this interview, was I noticed you do seem, and this makes sense if you've been doing it for 20 years, you do seem passionate about calling out people who are manipulating the system or manipulating record keeping systems in general. I watched your video on the dragster guy.
Yes.
I can't remember.
Todd Rogers.
Todd Rogers. Who am I mistaken in understanding that he is somewhat affiliated with Billy Mitchell? Or
completely affiliated.
Oh, okay.
two peas in a pod, man. That you can't separate those two. I mean, they've been sort of in with each other for many years. So and Todd Rogers is also banned for claiming impossible times, and there's like a very long history. So it's sort of fitting that they're associates.
Gotcha. Okay, so they're not just like, oh, it's two guys who happen to have high scores and things, so they knew each other that way. They're like associated beyond that.
Yes.
Okay.
And what's interesting is that Todd Rogers has also filed a lawsuit against Twin Galaxies as well. And that was filed in January, I believe. It hasn't been served. But he originally did it representing himself, but I think possibly around April. I don't know the exact dates, but then he got representation.
Right.
So I think maybe they're waiting on what's happening with the Mitchell lawsuit. But as at the moment, it's just been filed. So he's also, it's more than just Mitchell suing Twin Galaxies. It's also Rogers.
Okay. Yeah. Some of the reasons that someone might do that, in case the chat wants to know, is if you're running up on the statute of limitations, is one of the big things, where if someone said something about you in California, I believe it's 2 years statute of limitations on defamation, you would go ahead and file your lawsuit as a pro se litigant, and then if you're pursuing representation when you do, you would then amend the claims prior to it. And that's probably why he's maybe filed it and not served it. But in Minnesota, you can't do that. In Minnesota, the actual action commences upon service, not upon filing. So it's a little bit of a different system.
So you have to serve it before 2 years, is what you're saying, is it?
Yeah, in Minnesota, you would have to initiate the lawsuit, you have to serve it. You can't even file.
Okay.
You can't just file a lawsuit without serving it. The only rare things are like orders for protection, stuff like that. You would file those and ask the court for like a temporary order, and then they would serve the temporary order and allow the person to respond for a full hearing later. But that's just only for emergency stuff here, to protect people from getting killed or whatever. But yeah, for a regular civil lawsuit, you would have to serve it in advance of filing it. But I know in California, I believe you file first there. I think in New York, you file first as well, and then file your proof of service later. And that's how you do it for federal court also. So that's likely has something to do with it, but I have no idea. Okay, so what got you into speedrunning? I mean, aside from it just being cool, to kind of take a video, not in that way. Don't get me wrong. No, but
speedrunning is never cool.
But the idea,
maybe he's getting there now, but
no, it's just the idea of taking something to a top level, right? Like that's what I mean by cool. It's like, okay, everybody can play Pitfall or whatever. I don't know. Did people speedrun Pitfall? Is that a thing? or is it a high
You
school
talking about
game?
the Atari game from like 40
Yeah.
years ago?
Yeah.
Okay, I wouldn't have a clue. Wouldn't have a
Well,
clue.
you cover a bunch of 40-year-old games, so I have no
I
idea.
don't think so. I don't think so.
But yeah, so but yeah, it's one thing, for example, it's one thing to go to an arcade, pump in a quarter and play Donkey Kong, right? But it is something else to be one of these guys who gets like a million two points on it and really hammer out both the endurance aspect of it and also the skill required to just rack up points in that sort of setting. So what attracted you to this idea where you go, you know what I'm going to do in 1999 is I'm going to start speedrunning games.
Yeah, well, it's a little bit different these days to what it was back in the day, because these days speedrunning is like a thing.
Right.
And it has a lot of online presence, and if you're a gamer, you kind of know what speedrunning is. It's sort of been clearly defined by this point, but back then, even the internet wasn't super popular, and speedrunning in general wasn't super, like, you wouldn't even know. Like, back when we were doing it, it didn't even have, like, people weren't even calling it speedrunning.
Yeah, I had no. I mean, I was relatively present on the internet in 1999. I would have been either a junior or senior in high school at the time. I was playing EverQuest at an unhealthy amount. So so I was, involved in that. I was on internet forums talking about it, and I don't remember speedrunning being a thing until the AGDQ stuff really started picking up.
Yeah, it was more Twitch. Twitch really blew up speedrunning. But these days you might just be a gamer and you hear about speedrunning, you look at it and you think, oh, that's interesting, let's do that. Back then, it was completely organic. So, for example, for me, it began when, GoldenEye specifically had the best times and they had cheats and everything. So, by design, it kind of makes you think about completing levels quickly, because if you do, you get a reward. And that sort of embeds the idea in players. And then some players might take that sort of to the next level and say, okay, well, I beat the cheat time. How fast can I, beat it? How low can I take it? So for me, it was just a friendly competition between me and a friend of mine. I said to I don't know who began it necessarily, but I said, okay, I got this time on this level. Do you think you can beat that? And I was just like a competition friendly in that regard. And then sort of he went away and then called me the next night and he said, hey, I got this time. And I was like, wow, how'd you do that? That I was sort of blown away by the fact that he had sort of come up with a new strategy and done something that different than I had, and sort of got a way better time. And sort of like that sort of just sparked the interest in playing around with it and, trying to compete for best times. And then, magazines at the time had high score sections in them.
Right. Yeah.
And then one had.
Well, back when video game magazines were a thing and were important and weren't just like a weird pseudo political rag about video games. It's like, it's like I remember like I would wait, and then it was the only time I wanted to go to the grocery store with my parents was when I knew there'd be like a new Game Informer, a new Nintendo Power that I could go buy or whatever. No, I think I had a Nintendo Power subscription actually. And then like Game Informer or whatever, like going and actually buying those things every month was like it was like a treat, because that's where you got all of the strategies. I even remember my uncle asking me, he's like, I need everything you got on Dragon Quest 2 for the Nintendo. And I was like, here you go. I got this Nintendo Power with a strategy guide in it. And that was
a lot more exciting back then. I mean, these days you sort of have a question about a game and you know that you can just get the answer. I mean, at the click of a button, you've got all the information you want. It's sort of less exciting. Back in the day, if you had a game, you didn't know how to beat it or whatever, you had to either wait for a guidebook or you had to wait for a magazine. And the whole process of finding out cheats and secrets was a big deal. And for children back then, it was really exciting. And magazines were a really awesome thing to have.
Yeah, now they're just
you can't really relate these days. Like, kids these days would have no idea what it was like.
No, because now it's like you just go to whatever website and then you hate whatever they write. because they have to write so much now, because it's got to be a daily publication with 4 to 10 articles. And it's like back then they just put together a solid magazine, like 5 to 6 game reviews, maybe a section on strategy, a preview section with the the next 5 upcoming games. It was a put together thing, and you only got it once a month. And so they really had to whittle down to good content and make an actual product. And now it's like they just have to throw up stuff and keep feeding the beast every day for clicks. And so,
so the profit system's different,
right?
You're paying directly for the content back then. Now it's sort of just getting clicks for advertising dollars. I mean, it's just a whole different thing.
It's a mess. It's a mess. Okay, so you start off this speedrunning thing, you and your buddy kind of going back and forth trying to beat each other's times. What were the games? Like, what type of games are you getting into in 99 to do this, to kind of really get your start?
Is GoldenEye.
Okay, so it's just GoldenEye.
Yeah. GoldenEye, and then a little bit of F-Zero X.
Okay.
These are, I had a Nintendo 64, so they're all in there. And then another big one was Perfect Dark.
Right. Okay.
Perfect Dark was huge. I think when Perfect Dark came out in 2000, it was massive. So it was definitely the most popular game to speedrun in the year 2000. I think it was pretty big.
So, my biggest accomplishment, I think, was a double backflip on Wave Race 64. That was my Nintendo 64 accomplishment. So.
Yeah.
But yeah. So okay, so you're playing this, but then of course you say you've been.
So what happens is like, we obviously had the casual competition, and then back then I was pretty tech savvy, and I think a lot of kids at that time were. So I'd go online and search for what maybe there's sort of someone else is doing the same thing. So I'd maybe search for GoldenEye fast times or whatever. And then I discovered there was actually a rankings, a GoldenEye speedrunning rankings. It's not really speedrunning. It's called just world records, GoldenEye world records. And there's, ranks with, all the world records and everything. And that was mind blowing for me. And then from there, I was sort of just hooked. I think you have to be coming from a place of extreme nerdism. Like you have to be, you have to be a special type of gamer to really get into it. And I think more so back then. So these days, there's some commercial viability to speedrunning, but back then, none of that. So there's no money in it. There's no popularity in it. No one knows what it is. It's extremely niche. So in order to be sucked into it, you really have to be special, and like not in a good way. And
no, I get it.
Yeah, so that's where I'm coming from. It's definitely interesting.
As a side question, it's unrelated to anything we're talking about, but where do you think that changed? Because I have a theory on what actually changed. I think it's gaming in general. Obviously, the niche aspects of gaming had to catch up. Like, I made fun of my friend for organizing and alphabetizing his Final Fantasy VII inventory. And he deserved to be put in a locker for that. But there was some point that video gaming in general went from like you got beat up for it to the guys who were beating you up for it wanted to suddenly hang out and play games, right? Where do you think that was?
Twitch.
You think it was all totally. That? You think it was Twitch? Yeah. See, I think it's Twitch. I think it started with Halo. Personally,
what year?
The original Halo on Xbox.
Yeah. What year are we talking? So when did Halo come out? Was that 2001?
God, I can't. It might have been. What year was Halo Combat Evolved? Let me look. Like you said, we can just click.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, 2001. Okay, so I had just graduated high school. That's right. My buddy shows up, or he calls me. He's like, "Hey, you got to come over. I bought this new game, and we're gonna play it." And I was like, "Oh, okay."
Yeah.
And it was a split screen shooter. It'd been a while since they'd had something like that was any good, and so we sat and played it. I think the last one was GoldenEye, actually. So then we sat and played Halo co-op. And just burned through it the entire game. It was a magical experience.
Well, you're talking about sort of socially
Right.
On the school level. I was thinking more online.
Oh no, I'm talking
Popularity.
yeah, I'm talking about like where literally the people that you interact with on a daily basis stop
Mhm.
making fun of they stop making fun of people for playing video games other than Madden, right? Cuz
Okay.
all the sports guys would play Madden or whatever, but that was, that was it. Any other game like that, it was uncool. And then I think after Halo, for me anyway, in my town, that's where it's like people started playing video games more publicly than they had been
Yeah.
prior.
I don't know. I never thought, in my experience, I sort of looked back on this. I never thought it was the video games themselves necessarily that made people disrespect any other kids. I think there was just an association between antisocial behavior
Right.
and video games. So a lot of the antisocial kids, maybe up until the late 90s, went into video games because it was a solo act that you
Yeah.
didn't need friends to do.
Right.
And then it's just a sort of what do you call it, when it's a correlation between people who are heavily invested in video games and people who weren't successful socially. And that's sort of, yeah, that
Dagger to my
I'm not
heart.
sure when. I'm not sure when that changed. It's definitely changed now, but
Right.
and I couldn't say when it changed. I think it was probably after I left school, which was 2003.
Well,
I'm
now we have
just
girls
thinking
playing
about.
video games instead of guys
Mhm,
pretending to be girls playing video games. So
mhm.
that's a big change.
Are you talking about Candy Crush? I mean, yeah, we've got like a lot of girls playing. Actually, I've noticed there's a ton of girls playing, the Counter Strike and actually
Yeah,
doing really well in like high level play,
it's
which
just
is great to see.
starting to break out a little bit. But
Mhm,
I
mhm,
just find the whole evolution of it as a medium interesting. And I was at a I sit on a charity board every couple years, and I was on this board, and we had a guy who does one of the he's a fund manager, right, a hedge fund manager, and he comes in and he's doing a pitch about why their fund was good, and what they honestly their primary investment was video game stuff, League of Legends. So
mhm.
I guess Tencent or whatever. They were invested heavily in Tencent and all of these other things, and he's sitting there, and I'm 39. At the time, I was 37, I think. And he's explaining to us, and I'm by far the youngest person in the room. He's explaining to us how profitable video games are and how big these events are being. I think the League of Legends World Championship that year had more viewership than the Super Bowl, for example,
Mhm.
and it's only
What
growing.
Yeah,
Uh,
what's interesting though is that the commercial input, like the actual investment from sponsorships, still far behind
right,
what you would see in real life sporting events. Uh, Maybe it's because the value of esports hasn't really been fully expressed, or obviously sponsorships are going to try and make as much money as they can, so it's going to take a while before the actual uh, the sponsorship payments are what they're worth.
right.
um, but yeah, it's still much lower than what you'd think it should be based on the viewership.
Right, and I think the other thing is, Super Bowl or whatever. That's Western. That's a Western sort of thing in a high advertising, high consumerism economy is where it's blooming out of. Whereas
Mhm,
esports has really taken root sort of in Eastern culture more, and is more. It's like it's weird. It's like migrating westward as far as getting to the U.S. and getting big. I find that in the stuff that I look at, like Tekken, StarCraft, or whatever, or that I have watched over the past couple years, you find that like South Korean players do exceptionally well, and American players are typically lagging behind outside of a few standouts.
Yeah,
So
well, I mean, they're catching up, especially
right,
with StarCraft. Well, I don't know about Americans necessarily, but there's a few European players that are up to scratch with the Koreans, and I think the best StarCraft player may be European. Uh,
mm,
Cyril.
no, I have no idea.
Okay, so I think last year he won the world the World Championship,
Sure.
the BlizzCon thing. So yeah, it's definitely changed as of the last year or two.
Hmm.
I don't know, but Americans don't seem to be big in the StarCraft scene. You know, they're not as top class, but the
Well,
Europeans definitely are getting there.
to be fair, I think in America, if you play StarCraft, you still should be beat up. Like all other video
Mhm.
games have caught up, but StarCraft, that one, I think it's still justified. We should probably fix it. But no, I'm
Why
kidding.
is that?
I'm just kidding. I'm so bad at real-time strategy that I always
Mhm.
just make fun of people who play them because it's easier than realizing my own inadequacy.
Yeah, yeah. It's extremely difficult. I think it's probably considered one of the most difficult.
Oh,
I mean,
wait,
is that it's probably the only real time. I mean, is League of Legends considered a real time strategy?
I don't think so. I think
Okay, yeah.
that's a MOBA or whatever.
Okay, yeah. There's no real other real time strategy games that are big, right? It's just StarCraft.
Yeah, I think it's StarCraft.
Yeah. Okay.
I mean, there's a pretty active competitive Total War Warhammer 2 scene. But I don't not on anywhere near like the level of StarCraft. They're active.
Mhm.
They organize events and stuff, but I don't know if they have like any sponsorships or cash prizes outside of their own, like whatever they get from their YouTube stuff.
Mhm.
But I don't know why I would sit and watch Total War 2, Warhammer 2 players over and over and over. I'm like, God, this is better than me playing the game because I'm bad at it. But I like it. So
Yeah.
okay, so anyway, kind of going through your progression, you've taken, you started back in '99. You're going through. When did you launch YouTube? When did you decide that this was at least somewhat of a business venture, and that it was
Mhm.
something you kind of wanted to focus on in a professional manner rather than just as a hobbyist?
Probably the seeds were planted around 2014. Uh, I've worked, I worked from 2004 until 2017 and 2018,
Sure.
and I always hated work. Always hated the jobs that I had. I mean, I never went to university. I mean, I did go to university a couple of times, but I dropped out immediately. I don't like studying or anything. Well, I
But
don't like
you,
studying very
right?
specific topics. I like studying what I want to study.
I was gonna say
And
you
yeah, I was
exhibit a
never good
lot
at
of
doing something.
Yeah, go ahead. Sorry.
No, I was going to say that. Yeah, I'm not good at doing things that someone else tells me to do. You know, uh, that's probably a negative thing a lot of the time. But if it's not a subject I'm interested in, I just hate doing it. I think I have a sort of childish rejection of doing things that I don't want to do. So I was always unhappy working. So I was always kind of in my mind, I don't want to do a day job. I want to do something. And I sort of, for a long time, I wanted to be an entrepreneur, start an online business, doing something like that. But then, YouTube came around, and I sort of started seeing the potential for that. So I had one video that I made, which was specifically designed to try and be a viral video. That was in 2014. And it got like 250,000 views, where I sort of played 3 games at the same time
Sure.
and beat them all in under an hour. And then that did get some gaming blog coverage.
At the same time, like you had them all
Mhm.
running and you're like flopping between
Yeah,
controllers
yeah,
or
exactly. I had 3 TVs, 3 Nintendo 64s, and I beat GoldenEye, Zelda, and Super Mario 64 within an hour.
nice.
And it's just a weird thing just to try and get a viral video, and that sort of worked.
Yeah.
That was very high effort, that whole thing. So it's not something that could be sustainable or whatever. That was a seed planted, and as the years went on, probably got to around 2017 is when sort of content creation in speedrunning blew up. So channels like Summoning Salt, Easyscape, and Apollo Legend sort of started becoming very popular on YouTube.
Right.
And before that, there was a couple of content creators that talked about it, maybe 2016, 2015, a tiny bit, but 2017 was the explosion of speedrunning content.
Sure.
And so from there, it's sort of something you could look at and say, okay, that's a thing. That's a thing. That's a potential. that you could actually see and sort of conceptualize. And I had the idea of getting into it, but having the idea is one thing and actually doing it's another thing. I had
Right.
reservations, I had fears. I wasn't sure if people would like, for example, wasn't sure if people would like the sound of my voice.
Because you
Or I
probably I'm just guessing you probably have, or at least before, hated the sound of your voice, like when you actually heard it played back. Is that a thing for you?
Yeah, well, I don't personally hate it, but I don't think it's as good as other voices. Like, I don't think it's, it's I prefer the sound of other people's voices for sure than mine.
I
I don't
always
think I
hated.
sound
Yeah, I always hated mine. Like, just when I would hear a recording, I was like, "Oh dear Christ, kill it." It's like,
yeah.
but no, I've gotten used to it a little bit more now.
Mhm.
But yeah,
Yeah, I have myself as well, but I've also realized maybe the sound of your voice doesn't matter at the end of the day, obviously. So unless it's like really, really terrible for some reason. But so I saw that explosion of content 2017. So the potential was there. And then what happened with my work actually in 2018? Well, actually, a few months before that, I started streaming on Twitch. I had sort of streamed on and off before 2018, but it was just like a streaming to friends. It was like nothing there, no viewership whatsoever, really.
right,
But in 2018, the end of 2017, I started streaming more, and I started getting some world records that were popular. So I started, and I had some help from some Twitch friends as well. And I was sort of taking it a little bit more seriously, and I started to get some viewership. So I had like a couple of hundred viewers or whatever on Twitch. Um, but then with my work at the end of 2018, the job that I had was sort of made redundant, and they wanted to move me to this other area, and it was debt collection.
oh God,
And yeah, and I hate talking with customers on the best of days, and that's with just sort of normal customer service. It's not for me, and I
right.
dealt with it for years. I got by, but I was never happy doing it. But then to go to the extreme and like trying to ask people to pay their debts back, was definitely not for me. So I just quit. And I asked my wife, and I was like, give me like 3 months. Give me
Right.
3 months to do Twitch or whatever. If I'm not earning anything after 3 months, I'll find a job. Uh, but yeah, I started streaming, and then at the end of 2018, so probably December, I started YouTube creation,
Right.
and then like immediately, it was obvious that I was going to do well.
Sure.
So it's only been less than 2 years that I started the YouTube content creation to get where I am now.
That's awesome, and I really like the bit about asking your wife, because I did the same thing.
Mhm.
I had made some videos covering some lawsuits. I had started doing some live streaming, and I still, I had an open office that I would go to for my legal stuff every day, and we had some stuff happen at home where I was home a lot with the kids, and so I wasn't able to go into the office as much. One day I was just like, I've been thinking. She's like, me too. I was like, oh God. but, but then it was like, I want to be home more, and I want to do this. I want to try out this YouTube thing. So, I can identify with that, and I appreciate that you shared that and did that, because I think that's something important when, especially for us YouTubers who are married, is like
Mhm.
that's a big consideration. It's a big ask to say, no, look, I'm not going to actually go get a paycheck from somewhere, but you have to trust me on this. It's a cool thing.
Yes. I think, less considerate partners might reject it, it might cause
Right.
issues.
Yeah.
But luckily, obviously, we've got fantastic partners, so didn't end up being a concern. But it was I I am a dreamer for sure. I want to do a lot, and I have very high goals. Uh, so I personally, I'm willing to sacrifice a lot to go for it. And I
Sure.
and I think in general, I like the idea of risking it, risking risking it to try and achieve your dreams, I mean, go for it, at least once. And I mean, the potential could be good. I mean, even the journey of trying to reach your goals is going to benefit you in some way, whether it be
Right.
skills you learn or whatever. But just being positive and going for something, that could make your life, way better, I think is a good thing. So I've always had that attitude anyway.
Yeah, I agree. This is probably a good time to maybe start talking about the subject of the video, because I've officially delayed it for about 40 minutes. So we should transition into that. But there are a couple chats that I want to get to real quick.
Sure.
And then we'll go. There's 3 right now. Ryan Ferrier says, remember, when you go vote, do not wear any MAGA hats, political gear, etc., as it is considered electioneering and could give you big issues when trying to vote or even waiting in line. This is from a former poll watcher. Yes, do not wear any political attire on election day here in the States. It is not a good idea. And while you may have a First Amendment right to make that statement, it'll just cause you trouble on election day, and it's a pain. So just go vote and then cause all the trouble you want at home. Automata says, Carl, great to hear from you. You make accessible speedrunning stories and clearly care about the history and integrity of the scene. Hearing some of the strats and hijinks people pull with stuff like ACE is fascinating. What's
Thank
ACE?
you. ACE is arbitrary code execution. It's just doing random crap in the game to sort of glitch the game into producing crazy outcomes.
Is that like
So
the stupid Mario 3 where you beat it in like a minute?
Yeah.
That thing
That's what it is.
That's annoying. It bothers me at a fundamental level to watch it.
As a viewer, it's not interesting. Okay.
No,
if you
it
care about
is.
the game's programming and all that kind of stuff, it's more interesting. But as a viewer, as a spectator, there's no value there.
I want to know how people figure this crap out. Like, how do you, it's like, okay, well, if you run and you jump on the third Goomba and then you grab a Koopa shell, this particular one, then you throw it and then throw another. It's like it's the most random thing I've ever seen. And so is someone, brief aside, is someone actually like looking at the code and figuring out that this is what'll do it?
Yes.
Or so they're not like randomly stumbling upon this stuff.
No, they, what do you call it? When they have the goal, they have the outcome that they know that they need. So they are looking at the code and they've said, okay, if the code says this, it'll produce this outcome. And then every little tiny detail, like for example, if this enemy is on screen, how does it change the code? And they have all these building blocks where if this action does this and this action does that, and it's sort of like, it ends up being math where it's like, okay, this is the end number that I need to get to. And these are the possible actions that I could take. And they all have these values. So how do I combine these values to create this end value that I need? So it's definitely, they know what they need to do. And then it's just a matter of figuring out, is there a way we can produce that with these building blocks that we have?
Because that Mario 3 one, it's like you have to be like pixel perfect on where you're standing when you do this thing.
Yes.
I watched that and I showed it to my wife and she just hit me. It was because we both, we both grew up playing the Mario games and watching The Wizard, right? It's like, haha, use the 2 flutes at once. That's the trick I knew. But okay. And finally, Loric Project says the U.S. won some esports competition in 2016 and every player was Korean American. Yeah. Well, it's like the Olympics. If we're not good at a certain thing, we just import someone who is. And give them citizenship and wait, 2 years or whatever, and then they're golden. Okay, so let's talk about the Mitchell lawsuit. And I don't know, did you want to go through? Do we want to just go through the questions that you had for me? Should we do some minor amount of backstory? I guess might be useful.
We'll do a super minor backstory.
Okay. Here, let me try real quick. Billy Mitchell is this guy who is alleged to have the first 1,000,000-point Donkey Kong score. He's also alleged to do the first perfect run of Pac-Man. And if you've been on the internet for a while, you probably remember seeing that perfect Pac-Man run, or at least seeing like the thumbnail for it and going, 6 hours? I'm not going to watch that. That's ridiculous. And so it's he was renowned for having those accomplishments and achievements. And then a couple years ago, he was actually those records were revoked by both the premier sort of video game record keeping company, which is Twin Galaxies. They revoked the records after an investigation, a very public investigation held on their forums by where pretty much anyone who cares about the thing already was, if I understand that right. And then also his Guinness World Record was revoked as well. But those aren't the only two records that were revoked. You said there was another forum, the Donkey Kong, a Donkey Kong forum specifically, that revoked his records as well. And maybe even before, right? Before Twin Galaxies or after?
Before, yeah. So what's interesting is that Twin Galaxies, everyone knows Twin Galaxies because of the King of Kong documentary and because Twin Galaxies is being sued. And Twin Galaxies, as a record-keeping organization, is large, and they cover a lot of games, and they are an authority in a lot of areas. But when it comes to Donkey Kong specifically, Twin Galaxies is not the authority on Donkey Kong. And the actual authority when it comes to Donkey Kong high scores is Donkey Kong forums. And this is where all the up-to-date scores are listed. It's where all of the top players congregate. And
this is the internet at its peak, right? There's a forum where the top players in a game that is doing retirement planning all hang out and discuss the top scores. I love that. It's so perfect. But yeah, this 40-year-old, like one of the first platformers ever made, if not the first legit platformer, guys are hanging out, still trying to outdo each other's scores, and still actually doing it. It's still a game where improvement can be made.
Yes.
So that's great.
But they are the authorities, much more than Twin Galaxies.
Right.
And if you ask all the Donkey Kong players, they will say the same thing. It's not Twin Galaxies, it's Donkey Kong forums. Donkey Kong forums made the statement that Billy Mitchell scores were generated from MAME.
Okay.
And they removed his scores. They kept one score which was done live in front of other players.
Sure.
Which was like 900 and something thousand. That score was kept, but the scores in question were all removed, and that statement was made in February, which was months before Twin Galaxies ended their investigation, and months before they also removed his scores.
Sure. And he has, of course, I don't know how you would sue Donkey Kong forum.
Well, he filed a lawsuit for Donkey Kong forums and the owner of Donkey Kong forums. And he also sued or filed a lawsuit for Jeremy Young, who was the person who created the dispute on Twin Galaxies.
Okay.
And he also made the post from Donkey Kong forum saying that his scores were MAME generated.
Gotcha.
But yeah, that hasn't been served. I think it might have lapsed by now as well.
I'm guessing he figured he couldn't extract any money out of him, even if he won. It's really hard to go after an individual plaintiff unless you know that person has significant assets. Is my guess.
But the reason it's important that Donkey Kong forum, the authority on Donkey Kong, made this statement months before Twin Galaxies, I felt like it was an argument against malice from Twin Galaxies, because if Twin Galaxies had malice, they could have just said, "Oh, Donkey Kong forum said that, so we're going to follow suit."
Right.
But the fact that they continued investigation, they continued putting resources into it for months after that before coming to their conclusion, I think shows that the investigation was reasonable.
Sure. And that's an argument to be made, and we'll get into kind of those arguments as we get into the questions about what comes next in the lawsuit, because I think those arguments are going to be a big thing, and I think based on what I've seen so far that there may be a shift in momentum as we go, but we'll talk about that as we get there. So okay, so they remove his scores, and he files suit against a whole bunch of people, but the real ones that he pursues are Twin Galaxies. And then he also filed suit against a YouTuber by the name of Apollo Legend. And though his case, did he ever serve Apollo Legend, that lawsuit?
He requested that he serve it personally.
Sure. Okay.
But I'm not sure if he actually served it. But on the actual filing, it said that he was going to serve it.
Okay. Was that and forgive me, was that one done in California or was that one of the Florida suits? Because
I believe it was California. I believe it was California. Could have been.
Okay.
It might have been Florida.
I know there were 3 suits filed in Florida that had not been served originally.
It might have been Florida.
Okay.
Yeah, it might have been Florida.
Gotcha.
Don't quote me on that.
No,
I'm not sure what difference it makes anyway.
It's in my first Billy Mitchell video. I talk about those other suits, or maybe it was the live stream. I can't remember. I can't remember which one. I just know that there were 3 suits filed in Florida. Okay, so he filed suit against Apollo Legend. What happens next? And he didn't file suit against Guinness, but I think there was some implicit threat going on there. Because what happens next, the next big news that I saw is that Guinness World Records comes in and reinstates Billy Mitchell's claim. And they make a public statement. He makes a public statement. It all seems very nice and negotiated and sort of a settled mutual statement that's made. Guinness goes ahead and says that they initially relied on twin galaxies, but after conducting further research that was and reviewing evidence that was presented by Mr. Mitchell, they've decided to reinstate the world record.
That's actually slightly inaccurate. Because for some reason this is like ignored, but they didn't say we're reinstating it because of our investigation. If you watch the statement by them, what they actually say is, yes, we did an investigation, but in cases of doubt or debate, we basically go back to the original source.
Sure.
And the original source was Twin Galaxies, but it was the previous owner of Twin Galaxies, Walter Day.
That's right.
So they're not saying they didn't say we're going to reinstate it because of our investigation. They said we investigated it, therefore there is doubt, there is debate.
Sure.
So we're just going to go ahead and take Walter Day and previous Twin Galaxies administration on what they said happened, which was the original Twin Galaxies administration said that he got the score.
Gotcha. And thank you. By the way, please correct me on any of the facts I get wrong, because I'm going off of what I just remember from the videos that I did. And that video was several months ago, I believe, when that happened. Okay, so then the next thing that I saw happened, and I didn't really comment on this at the time, but Apollo Legend apparently settled out with Billy Mitchell. And he removed all of his videos about Billy, and then he further transferred ownership of the intellectual property rights to those videos to Billy Mitchell as well as part of the settlement, which looks like Apollo was rather terrified of what was going on. That's
a can of worms, that one. I mean, it's hard to know exactly what happened between closed doors and what exactly the settlement was. I've heard reports. I don't like to believe reports, unless there's like hard evidence or whatever. But I just, gossip was going around that there was a 5-figure settlement that Apollo had to pay Billy Mitchell. And as you said, was correct. Yeah, he transferred ownership of the videos. He took plenty of videos down. And Apollo said he's going to quit YouTube as well.
So he did say that. I wasn't.
Yeah.
I had seen that his most recent upload is from like a year ago, but I had heard some people saying like he killed his channel or whatever, but I didn't actually see that aspect of it.
It was on his Twitter. I think he's removed it now, but he said, I YouTube, I'm going to quit YouTube, or I am quitting YouTube, and I've got like issues, like personal issues. Sure. And YouTube was causing him grief or whatever. So he's, according to his statement there, he's officially quit YouTube.
Do you think
I think it has something to do with, I wouldn't say it's part of the settlement or whatever, but I don't know what's going on with him. It's like just sort of his stances has been all over the place, where it's like saying, creating videos saying I'm never going to back down, and
Right.
everything I said is true, and Billy Mitchell's a cheater and all this kind of stuff.
Well, he
And
was. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
I was just going to say, it's weird that he would go like say all that and create those videos, but then do a complete 180 and then settle and give Billy Mitchell his videos and all that kind of stuff. I don't understand it. I don't understand where he's coming from, and I guess I never will. Maybe the videos were just a charade and it was just an act, but meanwhile in the background he was nervous and was scared. I mean, I would say I'm not easily rattled by a lot of this kind of stuff. But I mean, when I received the letter from Mitchell demanding $150,000, it's not like it does create some emotional response. I mean,
Yeah.
even though I'm like, dude, whatever, I'm not going to stop making videos about you. I'm not going to stop talking about you because you threatened me with a lawsuit. And even saying that, I still feel like, there was like a gut reaction, and, it became real.
Right.
It went from just me talking shit online, to like a visceral thing. So I'm sure in the background he's feeling something, but his YouTube persona was completely different to what to what decision that he eventually made was. Is kind of crazy.
Now, pure speculation, and if you don't want to speculate on it, that's fine. Do you think it had anything to do with the GoFundMe that he created that ended up kind of disastrous? Because, I mean, he asked for a bunch of money to countersue Billy Mitchell. He raised something like $25,000, I think, and then
I think 28,000.
Yeah, it might have been.
Yeah.
And then he does an about face on that thing real quick. Says he's returning all the money to fans. I don't know if that ever happened or not. Because I don't know how you easily would. GoFundMe doesn't work in the way, like, if you've got it set up to actually collect the money, GoFundMe doesn't have an easy mechanism for you to return it. Because once it goes right into your bank account.
Yeah, I mean, people have requested refunds from GoFundMe, from that particular GoFundMe, and whoever requested refunds have gotten refunds, but there was no automatic. There might have been a couple of people who received automatic refunds, and I believe at the time he was trying to refund it all, but I think it became too difficult, and I think he just sort of, it's all speculation, mind you. But I would guess that it was too difficult, and with everything going on, he just tapped out. And I'm not sure where that money is held. If GoFundMe, because I'm thinking if Apollo Legend withdrew it, I mean, do you know how GoFundMe works with the funding?
Yeah, I do. I'm intimately familiar. Yeah.
Okay.
So you create a GoFundMe, and then they do verification to make sure it's going where you say it's going, and then once they do that, they accept bank instructions. And then depending on kind of the size and the speed of donations, they do a sweep of the funds typically every 24 to 48 hours. If it's going quickly, if it's not going quickly, they can hold the funds for, a couple days. But really, once you start going, the withdrawals are automatic. They just
so they went to his bank account, basically, is what would happen.
I'm not saying
how do they?
I'm not saying they definitely went to his bank account. I'm saying that once you verify on GoFundMe, that's the intent, because they desperately don't want to be a bank, because then they get hit with a big regulatory structure that would make their business model a mess. So what they do is they hold the funds on a very temporary basis. For example, if you don't verify within 30 days, the money gets refunded automatically and it doesn't go to anybody.
Okay, so evidently he verified. I mean, otherwise everyone would have gotten their money back, right?
That's the assumption.
And then,
yeah.
If the money got sent to his bank account, and so how are people requesting refunds still and getting refunds? Like, where is that money being drawn from?
If he had, let's say he had made like 25,000 right away, and then 3,000 kind of trickled in, and they swept over the 25,000, but the speed of donations or whatever left like a little bit of a balance at GoFundMe. What they'll actually do is when refunds come in, they'll refund on, and they'll almost set a credit against the account up to a certain point, and they'll refund based on future contributions, or existing contributions that haven't swept. So old money back will be paid for by new money in. And the reason I know this is the GoFundMe campaign that I that I still kind of am running. But it had people were contributing with joke names, and they were reported for harassment because they were hilarious. And so then GoFundMe said, okay, any of the joke fake names, those things are going to get refunded. And then they went way back to the beginning of the campaign and were refunding out old names as the new money was coming in. So so they must queue up refunds, is my guess on how their system works. Is they queue up refunds in the order they come in, and then as money comes in to replace it, they'll send those refunds back. But and they're insured to some point, but I don't think they're insured against creator decided to end campaign because he didn't want to do it type thing. So I think at some point they just cut it off and say, well, there's no more refund available.
If you want to get your money back, maybe take it up with the creator of the GoFundMe at that point.
Right. And in theory, the GoFundMe creator can request from GoFundMe a list of names, email addresses, and dollar amounts that were donated and the dates that they're donated. So in theory, you could get all the information you need. I'm not saying that it would be easy. It would certainly, a GoFundMe of any appreciable size becomes a monstrosity. You get 2,000 backers and you're going to mail out checks for $5. That'd be quite an undertaking. So, yeah. So I'm not trying to cast any aspersions, just trying to get the facts out there.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's all speculation, but what's interesting is that there was a Reddit post sort of just a few weeks before Apollo made his announcement saying that, Apollo's had to get a job and he's working to pay back his settlement from Billy Mitchell, and it's taking his toll on him. And this is before he made any comments about settle or whatever. And then a few weeks later, he's made this post saying that he's, made an agreement with Billy Mitchell. There were posts that were sort of pretty, what you would say, not completely outrageous. You might want to believe them. That there was some payment, some significant payment from Apollo Legend to Billy Mitchell. And, it's not a good look given that he's settled and then he's got this GoFundMe and then went radio silent. And I was thinking that maybe maybe it's guilt. Maybe he felt guilty and that's why he's gone radio silent, because he feels bad for the situation and doesn't want to deal with it.
Yeah, I think without knowing the guy at all, but that video he did about, I think he did a video, or it was either video or post about stopping the GoFundMe and refunding everybody. The tone of that was one that was not the high, not a happy person, we'll say. He seemed very somber in that. I swear it was a video that he did on that, but
yeah, he made a video.
Yeah, okay. So I remember seeing him and going, yeah, this guy looks like he's in a rough spot. But if I were Billy, or in Billy's shoes, and I see a whole bunch of money raised, and it kind of coincides with the idea of a 5-figure settlement, that he had a 5-figure GoFundMe. And, to me, I think, okay, I set my sights on this $28,000 pot, and I go for that, knowing that that's probably all I'd ever be able to get out of the guy. And and if he did that with some scary lawyers, he might have gotten some results. Or better yet, you say, we'll never talk about it. People will assume that I took the 28,000. You keep X amount of dollars, to kind of pad you for the next thing. And again, I have no information about that. I'm just saying, like, the type of approach and negotiation you might take when you see a pot of money and you go, this is my one shot to get what I want out of this person. That's kind of a strategy that someone might pursue. But
Apollo's situation was a little bit different to, say, Twin Galaxies or mine.
Right.
Because Twin Galaxy, Apollo Legend had, for example, in his video that he made originally on Billy Mitchell, he talked about audio splicing. And he said, in Billy Mitchell's performances, it was sort of spliced together and there were audio cuts. But the thing is, his video never had audio. Like his performances don't have audio.
Right.
So, and you know that when you listen to it. I mean, it's pretty hard not to know that there's no audio there. So it's misinformation. And stuff like that is a mistake because then it sort of does show malice to intentionally, paint the picture in a different way.
Oh, and I was making this point a million years ago, but my brain scattered on it. But when you get a bunch of misinformation along with the good information, it creates a fog, right? It's like this guy did something wrong. A couple people are saying, and they've got the factual scenario, and it's like, yeah, he did this and this. It's like, no, that's not what he did. He did this stuff. And it adds a lot of confusion to it. And I think that's as we continue on, that's where we're going to get to with some of the stuff. Like you were talking about when I brought up the version of MAME or whatever, that's kind of that's a misdirection, so to speak. Is like that version is irrelevant because there was it was done in some way, even if it wasn't that specific version. Okay. So that was the big news, Apollo Legend, and then the most recent update, which is the video in question where you responded, was that two major rulings happened. I rate the first one as more important than the second one, and I think you had a question about that, and I know some other people had questions or criticisms about that, and so we can talk about that. I think that'll be an interesting discussion. Is the first one, he passed the anti-SLAPP motion filed by Twin Galaxies, and now the case will move on and progress past this pretrial stage. And then the second thing that happens is that Twin Galaxies prevailed on their motion for what's called an undertaking. Other states would call it a supersedious bond. But basically, Billy Mitchell is being asked to post a bond in the value of roughly $81,000 to $82,000. And that is, since he's an out-of-state plaintiff filing in California, if Twin Galaxies were to win ultimately and receive a judgment against Billy Mitchell for their costs or something like that, it would be really hard for California to enforce that judgment against him in another state. So California says, okay, if you want to proceed in our state, the privilege of using the jurisdiction will be to post this bond so we can guarantee recovery for our citizen if they do prevail. So that's where we are in the case. And that was a longer summary than planned, but I think it was thorough and it's useful. So let's kind of get into this. Do we want to just start going through the questions in the order that you sent them to me? Do you want to ask them? How do you want to do it?
Let's start with, can I bring up some clarifications that I want to make in regards to your video?
100%.
Okay. So one thing that you said was that there was a technician present for one of his alleged scores.
Right. And I might have misread that from the filings and my lack of knowledge of the underlying facts. But yes, please.
Sure. So and the technician's important because the judge mentioned him.
Right.
So
it's the Nintendo tech. That's what I was referring to.
Nintendo tech.
Okay.
Yeah. So the thing is, why doesn't Twin Galaxies care about the Nintendo technician that verified the board?
Right.
And so the way that he verified the board was that Billy Mitchell sent a board to the Nintendo technician by mail.
Okay.
The thing is, it's not like the technician was there at the performance verifying everything.
Sure.
And Billy Mitchell saying, yeah, but I used this board and this board was verified by Nintendo. So therefore my score is legitimate, but there's absolutely no evidence that that board was used to produce a performance, and you can't make that connection. And in fact, the evidence says that on the videotapes, that board wasn't used.
Now let me offer one minor correction in the legal sense, in that there is some evidence that the board would be used, and that would be Billy's testimony that it was used. Okay. Now it's self-serving testimony, but this is one of the hard differences between sort of internet investigation and how courts we talked about this before the show. Courts are going to be more like me. They're going to be relying on the two parties to bring all of the relevant facts as they see them and to bring all of the expertise in because, the judge and the jury are going to be unsophisticated typically in this particular area of fact, and especially something as technical as speedrun or high score cramming in a video game. So Billy's own testimony will be some level of value, although probably a very low one. So
sure. Yeah, I get. Yes, that's completely fine. I agree with that. Yeah.
So
saying there's no evidence is definitely misspeaking on that one.
Now, I would agree in the colloquial sense that there's no evidence that this has happened. It's just one guy saying it, but the way the court views evidence. So that's only distinction I want to make. I'm not suggesting that that it'll ultimately even matter in the long run.
And what's interesting is that the other point about the technician is that Billy Mitchell saying, "Why didn't you investigate the technician?" But the thing is, he died in 2010.
Oh, okay.
There's no way you can interview him.
Right.
It's like it's a mute point there. I don't understand what Twin Galaxies are supposed to do, and Twin Galaxies aren't even denying that he sent a board to Nintendo and Nintendo verified the board. I mean, that's not even in question. Like,
sure.
Yeah, we grant that, or not we as in me and Twin Galaxies, but we as in me and whoever else. You can grant that the board was verified and all that happened. Sure. It doesn't really change the conclusion.
Right. Okay, so that's a good clarification for me to have. So thank you for that.
Mm-hmm.
Was there anything else to kind of clear up before we jump into?
Other. Well, I think we'll talk about it now in case I don't forget. But we'll just jump into what the judge said.
Right.
About and what Billy Mitchell, and this will lead into a question that I had actually.
Okay.
I think it will lead into the first question. Or second question. So in Billy Mitchell's filing, he said that Twin Galaxies didn't interview witnesses.
Right.
And specifically that Twin Galaxies did not interview a referee that allegedly witnessed the performance. And that is a complete lie. It's a factual lie. And one of the first things that Twin Galaxies did when the dispute was opened was they contacted Todd Rogers. And Todd Rogers was the referee on one of the scores in question, or two of the scores that Billy Mitchell talks about. But see, there's three scores that he talks about. 1.047 million, which was the first million-point score. Then there was a 1.05 million, which was the second score.
Right.
And then there was a 1.07 million, which was the third score. And Twin Galaxies has no opinion on the third score. It has no opinion on that whatsoever. Didn't make a statement on that. But Todd Rogers was the referee in the second two scores, so number 2 and 3.
Oh, the guy from before. Okay.
Yes. So the guy who was banned for claiming impossible times. That guy, it was the alleged referee for scores 2 and 3. And yeah, like I said, that one of the first things Twin Galaxies did was reach out to Todd Rogers and ask him questions about Mitchell's scores. And in the like I said, in Mitchell's filings, he said Twin Galaxies did not interview any referees.
Right.
But then in the motion for undertaking, Twin Galaxies provided screenshots of the interview between Twin Galaxies and Todd Rogers, specifically asking about the scores. And I guess we could talk about how that affects the case.
Sure.
But also had a question, which was, are there any legal repercussions? What does it affect the consideration of costs for damages or whatever for misinformation or lying in the original filing?
Okay, so answering that kind of in a grand sense first, are there penalties for lying in a filing? There can be. They're extremely rare. And the reason for this is that the courts tend to be of the position that everybody lies, quote unquote, in their filings because they're presenting the case in a light that's most favorable to them. The idea of the adversarial system is you present your most favorable case, the other side presents their most favorable case, and the judge is supposed to find out which facts are the most accurate and reach whatever conclusion is correct. So it's a weird thing, but there's kind of an understanding that everybody lies. Now, you're not supposed to. I don't when I do my filings or anything like that, but I'm not, I'm not filing like civil suits that are he said, she said stuff. It's all criminal stuff for the most part, is the bulk of my practice. So, so I'm not really in that position as much, but the idea that you may get a fact wrong, I guess is how the court would say it, typically is not going to be a big deal unless that is an egregious misrepresentation to the court. And even then, your first time doing it, the court's usually going to give you some kind of warning, say knock that type of stuff off. You could be found in contempt. You need to amend this, whatever it is. In this case, I don't think representing that they didn't interview the technician will rise to that level, because what he could credibly suggest, even if it's not true, like let's say he hypothetically maliciously wanted to misrepresent this, which is a really really terrible strategy, and I'll talk about that in a minute, but if he intentionally wanted to do it, he could then basically say, well, when I said they didn't investigate it, or they didn't interview him, sure, they talked to him and asked him a couple questions, but that's not what I consider an interview. I don't think they followed the interview process that they would have for someone else or something. You could come up with some way where the word interview doesn't mean they never talked to him. It means they didn't talk to him in a sufficient manner. So,
sure.
So in that case, with that particular fact, I don't think that there'll be an overall punishment, but every little thing that you do like that goes before the court and specifically goes before a jury, they start to hate you a little bit, right? Especially the second and third time. It's like, he never talked to someone. And here we have the screenshots of him talking to this person and this person and this person. And every one of those you go, okay. And they, you're breaking down the credibility of one of the parties. Yeah. So that's why you really don't want to do it, unless you genuinely don't know. Now, maybe he wasn't aware, and again, I don't know, but maybe he wasn't aware of the conversation between Twin Galaxies and that guy. Like maybe he never saw the screenshot or something until the court filings come up, and then he can end up in some filing later, or just ignoring it, saying, yeah, I acknowledge that they did talk to him. Well, we weren't aware of that. And it would have been nice to know at some other point, type thing. But
in regards to the witnesses there, well, I just feel like something so egregious that was specifically pointed out I feel like that would in of itself go a long way to destroying his entire argument.
You'd want it to. You'd want it to, but
it's one of his key arguments is that Twin Galaxies was not willing to interview witnesses.
And it may in the practical sense. And this is, as I'm reading through your thing, and even before, just kind of reading through some of the allegations, one of the things that has to be said about this lawsuit is it is a huge uphill battle. It is a huge uphill battle for Billy from the start. And it's probably why, a big part of why his personal public relations campaign on this is always projecting positivity and momentum, is because if he is aware and if his lawyers are aware of the real challenges that they're facing here, and I assume that they are, because I assume they're not, his lawyers aren't completely incompetent. If they're aware of that, they know that half of this fight at least is the campaign, right? That's going on. It's him being Billy Mitchell, the underdog, fighting against the evil Twin Galaxies, rallying support and trying to restore his reputation through people. And that's a strategy that a lot of people take when they feel like they've been wronged, or they want to do representation or repair of their reputation. That's one aspect of it. So the trick is to present as credible of a case as you can in court, but to simultaneously work on the public relations side. And if I had to guess, due to the challenges, and one of them was articulated in your video, that Twin Galaxies doesn't have to post any score at all. They're an independent company. They're not like from a government bureau of record collections. You don't have a right to be in a Twin Galaxies report. So they can do whatever they want for whatever reason on that.
Mhm.
And that is part of the hurdle that he has to overcome.
Right.
So, and I think as this case goes on, he's really going to have to up whatever case he has quite dramatically to pull out a victory.
Yeah. Well, in the anti-SLAPP ruling, the judge, I think two things that I remember specifically was the technician
Mhm.
who died 10 years ago, and the Twin Galaxies not interviewing witnesses, which they did. But Mitchell claims that he provided a list, and then a list of people, but
Right.
Twin Galaxies is asserting that he never did.
Sure.
And then by the time Mitchell sent a retraction letter to Twin Galaxies and Guinness saying, here's all these witness statements. I mean, by the time that happened, Twin Galaxies has the statements from the alleged witnesses now, so there's no need to interview them at that point. But during the investigation, Mitchell provided no, aside from his word,
Right.
no concrete evidence that he provided names of
Sure.
witnesses and everything like that. But Twin Galaxies did reach out to Todd Rogers, the referee. They reached out to Walter Day, which is another one of Billy Mitchell's witnesses that provided testimony on behalf of Billy Mitchell. So that's two witnesses. He also Twin Galaxies also spoke with Richie Knuckles, who is another person that provided testimony for Billy Mitchell.
Is that a fake name?
Richie, no, it's not a fake name.
His literal name is Richie Knuckles?
Yes.
Oh, I wish my name was Richie Knuckles.
He's a friend of Billy's as well. And, he was actually one person that provided another copy of the videotaped performances. So there's multiple instances here of Twin Galaxies, reaching out and interviewing Billy Mitchell's witnesses.
Right.
And given that these are the main points that the judge was saying, if Billy Mitchell can prove these facts in court, there's evidence there for malice.
Sure.
And given that the fact that there's so black and white evidence that is not the case, I was going to ask you about summary judgment, because in your video you mentioned that you don't believe that has a high chance of probability.
Yep.
But I think based on the own judge's comments about why the anti-SLAPP went through, and given the fact that you can so easily debunk those specific statements, do you think summary judgment has a probability or possibility of being successful?
Yeah. Okay. So two parts to that. First, passing the anti-SLAPP, and this just kind of goes over the past two questions, this one and the previous one, where the standard of, I guess, or not the standard, but how evidence is reviewed on anti-SLAPP is very different from trial. It's different from summary judgment in a little bit of a way, but the evidence is viewed in light, in favor of the non-moving party. So since Twin Galaxies moves for the anti-SLAPP, right, Billy Mitchell is then given all of the deference on any facts, either contested or uncontested, which is why if Billy Mitchell says they never interviewed everybody and they say, well, here's the screenshot of us interviewing somebody, that's a contested fact. And for the purposes of anti-SLAPP, it can go in favor of Billy. Now, that's if the judge determines that he has sufficiently presented evidence that didn't happen. And his statements can be evidence, as we kind of talked about before. It's not that his statements are better evidence. It's just that he's going to get the factual deference there. So that's one important thing to remember when we're looking at anti-SLAPP. But the second part that I wanted to get to is the summary judgment. And the standard for how you prevail on summary judgment is that there has to be no genuine issue of material fact in dispute between the parties to render a decision on summary judgment. So you typically an experienced civil litigator is writing their lawsuits and their motion documents in a way to constantly create an issue of material fact if they want to go to trial. If they want to win at summary judgment, they're going to try and say, we agree on all of the facts. In this case, there's clearly some disagreement on the facts that exists. And in defamation, there usually is. So when I was talking in the video about how I think he's got a low chance for summary judgment, defamation cases in general are hard cases for summary judgment, because one of the underlying ideas is that the person said something that's not true about me. So you have a factual dispute. Is what they said true or false? One person's going to say, well, my statement was true. That's my defamation defense, right? And the other person's going to say, well, that statement about me was false, and that's why I'm suing in the first place. So as long as you have that sort of factual dispute, it's hard to win for either party at summary judgment. And again,
let's see if the entire, just a clarification here.
Yeah.
If the entire argument for malice is that they didn't interview witnesses,
right,
and they show proof that they did interview witnesses,
he may.
Is that a factual disagreement?
It's a tough question, because kind of. I mean, maybe he has to amend his pleading, and that may be true. He may have to amend to say that they didn't interview specific witnesses, or where he has to acknowledge whatever. That's going to be brought up. And if the judge determines that, okay, well, this guy is just being ridiculous in his claim, that if he's admitting, well, yeah, they did these interviews because we have the screenshots, then yes. But if they present, if he presents some sort of evidence that that wasn't an interview, it didn't happen during the time period, something like that. Like, let's say with his friend, I can't remember that guy's name. The dragster. Yeah, Todd Rogers. So let's say he gets Todd Rogers to file an affidavit that says, yeah, they talked to me, but it wasn't about it wasn't an investigation, or it wasn't what I would consider an interview. We didn't really do this. I sent them information that's cropped out of the screenshot. If he creates enough of a dispute between what happened and what they're alleging, it's possible still to have a factual dispute. Mm-hmm. But importantly, you have to have all of those there can't be any material fact in dispute for summary judgment. If there's anything at all, it will have to go on. Now, the judge could rule that this is, for example, so defamation has the multiple elements, right? Like published statement, falsity, knowledge of the falsity, for the actual malice thing. So let's say they agree on the publication of the statement. They agree to the facts around the falsity, but they don't agree to the facts on actual malice. The judge can move to a limited trial on just that factual issue, right? They can reduce it pretty dramatically for judicial efficiency. You guys agree on everything else. We're not going to waste a bunch of time arguing about that. We're going to argue over the limited thing. So you can get a partial summary judgment grant on that, where we resolve these factual matters because you guys agree. And then now we're going to move on to resolve the last thing. So, but actual malice can be, that can be a killer all around. If you can't prove one of the elements outright, then, or if one of the elements falls in the other party's favor for Billy Mitchell, he loses, any one of those elements. So, but if it remains that, they did publish a statement, there's enough of it, or there's no dispute that it was false, which would be weird, right? That's the other problem that they're going to have, is there's going to be a dispute over the falsity of their statements. And then there's going to be...
What's interesting on that point is that it depends on how smart the judge is, or the jury, because Billy Mitchell keeps talking about live performances, and Twin Galaxies never made any comments on live performances. Twin Galaxies only made statements in relation to videotapes.
Sure.
And saying that the videotapes that Twin Galaxies that they have in their possession that are credited to Billy Mitchell do not show legitimate footage from an unmodified board.
Right.
And Mitchell is saying that, yeah, but I got the score live. So that proves that makes your claim false. But the thing is, they have nothing to do with each other whatsoever. And this this gap in logic seems lost.
The reason I guess that matters, and again, remember that we're talking to an unsophisticated audience, right? In the judge and the jury, is that if Billy's lawyers can create enough of a cloud around the idea that they're saying the tape was falsified in some way or edited or doctored, or I know produced with an emulator isn't editing or doctoring a tape, but if they can create enough of a fog around what that emulation entails to suggest that no, he was playing it in front of witnesses, he created it live, and if they're not able to grasp the idea that he could do it live and completely obscure the fact that he was cheating the entire time, right? Then you still have that dispute. And that's where highly technical cases or highly technical situations can get really, really troublesome for a judge and a jury.
Well, does the court ever say this is too technical for court to make a judgment on whether or not it's false or not? Therefore, it's going to skew on the side, lean on, like, be more biased to the defendant. Because
they could go either way, frankly. The court could say, yeah, you know what? This is really complicated, and it looks to me like the jury basically would return a verdict either for Billy and say, that they believe that there was a live audience there, and the juries don't really have to explain themselves, right? But if it goes to jury, they can. Well, there's a live audience there. I don't see how he can cheat, because if he would cheat, he would have to, maybe convinces them they had to switch boards or something. That would seem obvious, and none of that happened. So I don't see how he could have cheated in front of all these people. And then with that, they rule in Billy's favor, or the opposite. This is too confusing. These experts are in here talking about how this couldn't possibly be done, so it must be whatever. And then that's for the appeals court to decide at that point. Was this an adequate consideration? Could a reasonable jury have come to this conclusion? And that's just the messy nature of court. But I want to offer a minor clarification as well from something you said a minute ago. You said it depends on how smart the judge is. It really depends on how adept the lawyers are, because that's their hard job, is to take this very technical issue. I mean, we do this all the time, right? Like, you have your average jury can't figure anything out about DNA, but you have an expert break it down and convince the jury of whatever the DNA tests are saying. So the same thing. It's about having a really credible, likable witness to sit there and say, here is how this works, and to get that into testimony in a way that a judge and jury can understand. That's the most important part of this. And that's where all the chaos lies in a case like this, is with so much technical stuff going on, the skill of each side's attorney to tell the story is going to play a big factor in it.
Well, that's what I was saying. I think in the judge's ruling for the undertaking, he mentioned, he talked about how Twin Galaxies reasonably believed that they didn't need to interview witnesses, and they may have a case for that. And he didn't mention that they actually did interview the referee, and even though they provided proof of that, and in the motion itself, and I felt like that was probably not communicated well enough by Twin Galaxies, and not stressed enough, so that's not in the forefront of the judge's mind. It's not just about Twin Galaxies didn't want to interview witnesses, and they might have an argument for why that's okay, but they in fact did.
Right.
And it's like a complete rebuttal of Billy Mitchell's case.
Right. And that's something that they'll have to, and this is good. Like, in a way, this opinion is good for them, because it's like notes in a live production, right? Like, you're casting, or you're directing notes that, now, okay, here's the parts where we didn't communicate effectively our case, and we'll have to go and work on those. Because in fact, in reading that order, I was shocked when you sent the screenshot of where they had talked to one of the referees, because in the order, you don't get that impression that they did. And so yeah, they'll have to work on that quite a bit. And Yeah, do we want to talk about that undertaking a bit? Because that was your initial sort of comment and criticism of my video, is that I kind of brush past the undertaking. I don't see it as that big of a win, and you thought,
Oh, I think, yeah. So the
yeah,
difference would be, and obviously you're more of an expert on it than I am. I think I was talking about the specifics of the undertaking and what does that mean,
hmm
and specifically, like, yeah, the judge granting the motion, without any other information might not be a big deal, but how the judge granted it or what that included might be important. So,
sure,
for example, the judge granted the full amount,
right.
and in your experience, is that rare?
Um,
A big, and is that an important thing?
Okay, I'm not going to oversell my experience. I have not
Mhm,
had to deal with a motion like this. All of my stuff happens within the state of Minnesota.
mhm,
So I can't tell you if that's rare or not. What I can tell you is that the amount of $82,000 for a bond for a defamation case that involves lots of witnesses is not exorbitant at all. It's kind of
mhm.
what you in many ways, it's what you might expect the cost to be. In some
Right.
cases, that might end up not being enough, because I think in their motion they mentioned requiring something like 30 to 40 depositions.
In
Or
Twin Galaxies motion?
right, it's either mentioned there or it's mentioned in the opinion as to the
Mhm,
basis of the amount, but they mention
okay.
doing lots and lots of depositions. I mean,
Mhm,
depositions cost thousands of dollars each just on their own. So coming to a conclusion of potentially needing up to $82,000 that's not out of the ballpark. To me, that sounds like Twin Galaxies asked for a reasonable amount of money. Um,
which is probably the wrong thing to do.
yes,
You
and
want to ask for more than what you're gonna get, right? So that the
right,
judge
yeah.
comes down.
Right. That would be there's two manners of thinking about it. If you go too high, the judge will, just like laugh at you and be like, "Don't be ridiculous, don't overstep here."
Mhm,
And they have to consider the fact that $82,000 is a lot. For Billy, it's probably a bond that's going to cost him, 8 to 10 grand. Maybe down as low as 5 if he's got a good bond agent or whatever, or is really trustworthy. I don't know his financial situation, but if he has good
mhm.
financials, he can get a really 5 to 10% bond rate. Um,
Yes.
so if they start asking for $200,000, $300,000, that dollar amount ticks up quite dramatically, even on the
Mhm.
bond amount, and the judge is going to go, this is prejudicial to the other person because we're preventing them from filing until they post this. So
Right.
so you have two strategies. I think you should ask for a little bit more than what you think, expecting the judge to maybe take like a 10 to 20% haircut off it. Judges like to do that
Mhm.
because it shows that they were discerning, right? They cut a
Right.
little bit. So
Mhm.
that's kind of where I fall on it. But maybe they thought, this is what we're going to ask for. This is what we need. We think it's reasonable. We think he has the means to do it, and this is a good amount. So
Does it affect the amount that Twin Galaxies can ask for in the event that they prevail?
no, no,
Okay, so
and
because my reasoning would be like if they said it was going to cost 82,000,
right.
and then they do all the the depositions and everything, but the bill ends up being 200,000. Will the judge say, yeah, but you said it was going to be 82, and now you're claiming 200,000 in costs?
No.
That doesn't.
If they can prove reasonably that it costs $200,000, and that's going to be, a lot of that's going to be dependent on Billy's behavior, right? If he files a bunch of motions, does a lot of motion practice, does some frivolous stuff, if he's not complicit with discovery or whatever, or he sends them a huge discovery file that is bigger than anything they thought they were going to get, those types of things add to the cost of the action, and that's going to be his sort of fault for it, even if it's the proper thing to do. If he starts noticing a bunch of people for deposition, for example, that wasn't on Twin Galaxies list, I mean, they've still got to be there for that deposition, and it's going to cost more money to defend the suit. So if that happens, it ends up being $200,000. That won't impact him at all. That's just the floor of what they'll be able to collect in
Mhm.
that case. Um, But it's also, it's not necessary that they will actually collect the full amount either, right? Like they could, if they go through the case and they're only awarded $12,000 in costs, that's all they're going to get. And then that other 70 grand will go back to the bonding agent, and Billy will work that out with them, type thing. So, so it kind of, it goes both ways. And this is ultimately why I didn't focus too heavily on the undertaking, is because it's just a bond amount. It's like an insurance policy for Twin Galaxies. And it also, the other reason, I think I mentioned this in the comments briefly, but to talk about it more, was the bar that they have to pass to get this bond is really low. It's the reasonable possibility of success on the merits. And
But it's like it's higher than anti-SLAPP though, right?
no, it's much lower.
It's not higher. It's lower than anti-SLAPP.
Yeah. So a reasonable possibility of success on, well, I don't know. Maybe I shouldn't say it's much lower.
My reasoning
Sure.
would be because they actually have to provide. Do they have to provide physical evidence?
They have to basically no. And that's probably why anti-SLAPPs are harder, even though the standard is similar, right? Prima facie, on the face of it, you have to prove this. But lots of anti-SLAPP statutes, California and Texas, require that, yeah, you have to make a prima facie showing, but you have to do that with some evidence. Where in other cases, you have to make a prima facie showing, but you don't necessarily have to have evidence. You just have to have allegations that amount to a prima facie showing. Okay, so with the undertaking, a reasonable possibility of success on the merits is basically the idea that your case has any level of merit that it would qualify for a judgment. In a defamation case where the plaintiff ultimately loses in California, one of the remedies for the defendant is to collect attorney's costs and fees. So they show that they've got some, they basically got factual disputes, and they've got a statutory remedy for receiving money from Billy Mitchell. That's about all they have to do. But the language that's used, reasonable possibility, is similar to what's used in like an injunction order. And an injunction order, it's showing a likelihood of success on the merits. And I saw a lot of people I checked out some Reddit stuff or whatever, where some people were critical of what I said. And they kept saying likelihood of success. And so I think there was some confusion there. That's an actual really high bar to pass that you would use for a temporary injunction. And so I think some people might have been conflating those two ideas, that they've seen likelihood of success. Oh, that means that Twin Galaxies is likely to win. That's what the judge has found. And that even if Twin Galaxies is likely to win, I think right now they are. Even if that's the case, I don't see that in the judge's language that he finds that they're likely to win, just that they've shown that minimum bar of reasonable chance of success. And they
is it similar to the anti-SLAPP where in the undertaking, where it's like if the facts that Twin Galaxies have laid out, if they're proven, it would give them a reasonable chance of prevailing, as opposed to the judge actually looking at the exhibits, looking at the evidence, and saying, based on the evidence that you provided, you have a chance of prevailing.
I think the reality here is that the judge sees facts in dispute. And so there is and so while Billy did provide his prima facie case, Twin Galaxies provided some things that could rebut his prima facie case. Now, he's not permitted at this point in the case to say that they do rebut it or don't rebut it. That's not his job. But he says there are facts here that might rebut it. And if they do, then they'll succeed in the case. And then if they succeed in the case, they have their remedy. So it's similar. It's similar in standard, but again, like the anti-SLAPP burden is a really weird burden, because it sounds low, but it ends up being high in practice. If that makes any sort of sense. It's not.
Well, the thing is, I would say the actual argument itself, I would say that the arguments themselves, you can correct me.
No, go
The
ahead.
arguments themselves have a higher bar, but the evidence that you need to provide has a way lower bar. You know what I mean? Like you could claim, for example, Billy Mitchell could claim that Twin Galaxies never interviewed witnesses, and that Twin Galaxies said, we think that your score is legitimate, but we're going to remove it because we hate you.
Right.
See, and Billy Mitchell could say that in his filing, and the judge would have to take it at face value, as
Sure.
long as he provided, So the actual argument itself is one thing, but actually supporting it with any kind of factual evidence is something else entirely, which isn't required.
It's
So
well, on anti-SLAPP it is. And this is, here's the other thing. The judge may have gotten the anti-SLAPP wrong. Which is something I did see some people say, and that's a very real possibility, because so anti-SLAPPs have this weird thing where they ask for something called clear and specific evidence, which is not a heightened evidentiary standard. It just means that the evidence has to be clear and specific. Whatever that actually means is kind of a weird thing, but Texas is the same way. So you have to provide some evidence. But what that evidence is ends up being very case specific and very discretionary to the judge. And that's why
it could just be Billy Mitchell's testimony saying, I didn't cheat.
For some judges, yeah. For some judges, it could be, well, they presented testimony under oath that they didn't do this thing, and that's enough. For other judges, they want to see, some sort of statement from Twin Galaxies that would show that level of malice or reckless disregard for the truth. And that's a harder thing. And the reason I bring this up is because it's a really inconsistently applied thing, and why so many of them do get appealed. And that was one of the questions you asked, is what happens on an appeal in this case. And we can talk about that too as soon as we're kind of done on this subject. But I know my answer sounds kind of weaselly, and that's because, and this is why I don't like anti-SLAPP statutes, is that the application of them is one where a judge is not supposed to weigh the evidence, but they inevitably do. And so it gets...
Well, it's a human, there's a human element.
Right. But in theory,
it's unavoidable.
In theory, the purpose of an anti-SLAPP is to say that you have some claim, like you have a claim that has some minimal amount of merit, and you should be able to have your thing. And the anti-SLAPP is, there's no claim at all, right? There's something so obviously glaringly wrong with their claim, they're just doing it to punish the other party. So then the questions about how that ends up playing out, how that happens in every case that isn't an anti-SLAPP, is just making a prima facie showing with some allegations, typically under sworn allegations by the plaintiff, that they did this thing. And the allegations have to be specific, right? Like, you can't just say, well, I think some people had some meetings and conspired against me. You say, this person met with this person on or about this date or in this month. In that discussion, they talked about this. And I know that because so-and-so relayed that to me. But you can make that allegation without having like a screenshot of the conversation or whatever. In anti-SLAPPs, you have to provide something a little bit higher. But it's the same standard, but you need evidence. So it's not the same standard.
Right.
So it's just a mess. And that, again, I hate the inconsistency of them because of that sort of confusion. And I hate that many of them result in appeals when they're supposed to be designed to remove frivolous claims right away. They end up adding, a year of process and a whole lot of cost to it through the appeal process. So,
yeah. And is the appeal, we're going to talk about the appeal,
right?
Or potential appeal. Is it actually examined any differently to as if to the examination done by the original judge, or is there a different process in looking at the anti-SLAPP?
Yes, appeals are ostensibly examined a little bit differently. They have to deal with the same issues, all of the issues that are raised at the trial level. They have to deal with the same set of evidence. No new evidence would be permitted. But there are a couple different avenues. If you're appealing the order, it would be was evidence improperly excluded, right, or improperly included. So Twin Galaxies, for example, can say, they objected to a lot of Billy Mitchell's evidence, and a lot of it was actually excluded, if I remember right from the order. I kind of skipped that in the video because it was I didn't want to sit there and reference the hundreds of pages, but a lot of the evidence was excluded. So they could say, though, that the other evidence was improperly included. That's a tough road, but they could do that. They could simply say that the judge got it wrong. The judge included facts that are not facts, or are so obviously disputed by what they presented that they shouldn't be considered. And then, at that point, the appellate court is going to have to go through the facts and try and make a determination on whether the judge made the correct decision. And if they come to the idea that the judge is in clear error, that he should not, either he abused his discretion in admitting evidence, or if they look at the evidence and say this isn't sufficient, then Twin Galaxies wins on appeal. That's basically that. Now, as for the process, in theory, is a little different than the district court, because one, you have 3 judges on appeal, and they have clerks, and everybody is supposed to familiarize themselves with the entire record that's presented on appeal, and they're supposed to go through it. So
is that just the anti-SLAPP motion and the original filing, or would it include the motion for undertaking as well?
It would include whatever is in the case.
So all of the filing.
They would include all of the filings. However, they'd be bound to the same rules on determining the anti-SLAPP. So they would still have to.
That's the problem for Billy or Twin Galaxies, however you want to look at it. But the fact that they're going to be aware of all the facts that shouldn't even be considered,
right?
I'm surprised that's the case.
Yeah, it's especially if you allege that stuff was improperly included or excluded. They're going to be pulling up, they're going to have to look at that stuff and determine whether the judge abused their discretion in including or excluding it. So but it really does. Again, it's another one of those things where it's up to what the lawyers appeal on. It's up to the arguments that they make in their appeal documents. The court's not, the appeals court is not allowed to consider really other things that aren't brought up by the parties, right? Especially on appeal. You're appealing these specific failures of the lower court, and the lower court is supposed to rule on those specific failures, or the appeals court is supposed to rule on whether or not the lower court was right on those specific items. So it highly depends on it. I don't know if Twin Galaxies will appeal this. I suspect they're talking very heavily about doing it, and very, if they're going to do it, they have like a 30-day window to do it, I believe.
60 days.
Is it 60 in California? Okay. In Texas, on an anti-SLAPP, it's 21. It's an accelerated schedule. So,
and we don't know if Mitchell hasn't put up the bond yet. So,
right, they might be. So he's got 30 days to post the bond. They've got 60 days to appeal, which gives them another month after he posts it to make the determination whether they want to proceed or not, if he wants to proceed.
The interesting point of note, you can clarify this: the bond gets frozen if Twin Galaxies appeal. So the bond is going to be sitting, if the appeal process takes a year, like the bond is going to be sitting there for a year, while they appeal the anti-SLAPP. Is that correct?
I believe so. That's how it typically works. And again, it's to ensure the possibility of judgment, because if the appeals court renders a decision in favor of Twin Galaxies, then Billy loses and Twin Galaxies collects the same way that they would if they prevailed at the end, right? They get to collect on their attorney's fees so far.
Or would the cost be a little bit greater because they appealed? Is the cost of appealing factored in?
It can be. Depends on it. If they request it and it's granted. Yeah.
Because it's weird. That would seem like he would be a detriment to Mitchell because he's not responsible for the initial judge making that mistake. And now he has to pay for that judge's mistake by paying for the appeal costs. You know what I mean?
It's one of the reasons I hate anti-SLAPPs. I think they increase the amount of time that these lawsuits take, and I think they increase the cost through the appeal process entirely. Because let's say they do appeal. Well, this thing gets shelved then for the appeals court, and after COVID, you're talking, 6 to 9 months before the appeals court takes it up. You're basically adding a year, right? You're adding a year to the suit at minimum. And then if Billy wins and it goes back, Billy prevails on appeal and it goes back, then you're adding you've got another year to go at least of litigation. So it's a really long thing. And in a weird way, if I'm Billy's lawyer, I'm talking to him right now saying, there's some merit in not posting the bond and proceeding at this point. Like, you have got Twin Galaxies facing, they may appeal the decision, they may not, but if he doesn't post the bond, they're probably not going to appeal. Billy can then run on the idea that he showed enough, right, to say these people lied about him or mischaracterized him. He didn't win the court case, but he can even say, look, the appeal and all this stuff is going to take a year to 2 years to figure that out. I want to move on. I've shown that these guys didn't do the right thing, and we're gonna move. He could try something like that, right? And
well, he would. And
the downside of not doing that is a lot of litigation expense. And if they're talking,
well, so if he doesn't pay the bond,
right,
does he have to pay the cost of the everything up to this point?
I believe, since he has prevailed on anti-SLAPP, absent an appeal, he, I believe, could fold the case and have everybody basically walk away. I'm not 100% sure on that, but typically a court is going to let a plaintiff stop prosecuting the case still at what's considered an early point in the case. And if they don't want to pursue it anymore, they're gonna do that. They may try and award Twin Galaxies some costs, but he did prevail on anti-SLAPP.
They could do a Twin Galaxies could sue him separately.
They could try, yeah. They could say that he was, sort of a malicious, not really a malicious prosecution, but something along those lines, that he was abusing the court or whatever. But he has no obligation to continue a suit that he doesn't feel he wants to pursue anymore. But of course, maybe he just negotiates that settlement out with Twin Galaxies too, and says, "Hey, let's just walk away."
I can tell you because Twin Galaxies, when the undertaking motion was, the ruling on the undertaking, the motion for undertaking came out 2 days before the anti-SLAPP.
Sure.
And when the ruling for the undertaking went out, Twin Galaxies did offer for Mitchell to drop the case and not incur costs.
Right.
And Mitchell did not accept that.
Sure.
So that was already on the table before the anti-SLAPP came out. So I doubt that would happen now.
Right.
Now that he's had that win.
You're probably right, but it's always possible for someone to get past that sort of heat of the moment thing and go, "Hey, by the way, you got to cough up 10 grand." And that 10 grand is going to sit there. And if you lose, you're going to owe a bond company another 70, and you may end up owing a bond company another 70, and you may end up owing Twin Galaxies another 100 on top of that. I don't know. Again,
he's going to be paying interest on that bond immediately anyway. Like, so it'd be like paying interest on the 70 grand or whatever.
Depending on the bonding company, a lot of what the bonds will do is they'll charge an upfront interest amount that is just non-refundable. So it's like a one-shot 10%. So let's say he puts 10% down, pays 10% in interest on that amount. So he pays $8,800 for an $80,000 bond, for example. Wouldn't
it be 10% on the loaned amount?
The bonds that the bonds that I've seen, what they do is they put a fee on the not on the bonded amount, which is weird, but on the lower amount. But again, I'm dealing in criminal stuff usually, so
Okay.
they may think, oh, if this guy goes to prison, then we're never getting any money. So
Yeah.
that could be the issue there. I'm not sure. I could ask. I'll ask one of my buddies who does some of the bonding stuff, and I'll send you a message about it. But it's quite possible that they'll have just an interest rate fee up front, where they've just front load like a year of interest, and that's that.
Sure.
But and that's going to depend on the type of bonding agent he uses, his financial situation, the income he's likely to incur going forward, and stuff like that. So I don't know how wealthy Billy is, but he he does have a long career of making some pretty decent money.
Sure.
So he might have good financials and be able to get some pretty good stuff.
Well, maybe. I mean, the whole point of when he submitted his financials to confirm damages, he was arguing that his business took a massive hit.
Yeah, his sales went from basically in 2017, I think it was, his hot sauce sales went from 800,000. Then in 2018, when the announcement came out, they were cut in half basically, and then that persisted the next year. But those businesses still pulled in, $400,000 a year. I don't know what his overhead is on that business or whatever, but
Yeah.
But you can incur damages and still be quite wealthy and still have quite a high income.
Yes.
So, and I know literally nothing about his finances other than that tiny blurb from the opinion, so, so
By the way, I just want to ask.
Yeah.
Sorry there.
Oh, go ahead.
I had a list of all sort of falsities that Mitchell had claimed, but I'm just wondering, is it even worth discussing those when the judge has sort of written out what he thinks is pertinent to the case? The judge, spoke about the technician and witnesses. Is there any point of even talking about anything else, given that the judge itself didn't mention it when he did his ruling?
At this point in the case, no. I mean, as a sort of exercise of the types of arguments that are going to be presented, yeah, there's value in trying to figure out how in the hell Billy's going to try and pull this off, right? And to me, that's actually the most interesting thing. If he goes forward in this, even just what you've presented here, he's got a massive sort of hurdle in doing this. So there's some idea and maybe theory crafting the type of arguments that Billy would make to show defamation, and that I would maybe be interested if you have an opinion on how he would do that, because it sounds like you're of the opinion that it's basically insurmountable, which
Well, the thing is, I was going to preface this whole conversation by saying, at the end of the day, the court decides what is or isn't defamation.
right.
And, it's not up to me. It's not what I believe is or isn't defamation. I can sort of present some evidence either way, but it's not my decision what is or isn't defamation or whatever.
Right.
So I don't know what legally is or isn't defamation. So me having an opinion on what is or isn't defamation is seemingly irrelevant. And we're going to find out. And this case seems to be pretty novel. So who knows?
Yeah, and the novelty of it has some benefits for the parties too, because if you can get the judge interested in the subject matter of your case, they're going to read stuff more carefully. And I think maybe they haven't done that very effectively yet, which is playing in Billy's favor at this point. But and that's based on the judge kind of missing some of the evidence. But if you can get them really interested in it, if you can sell the story to them, then they're gonna start reading those exhibits a little more carefully. They're gonna do stuff like that. So that's kind of one of the interesting things. The other is that Billy, like him or hate him, he's obviously a relatively charismatic figure. I mean, he's polarizing, which is going to make for some interesting stuff in the courtroom if this thing does go forward. Because if he gets on the witness stand, you know, the what you call it, the jury is going to either like him or hate him, and that'll be interesting
Mhm.
to see how that type of thing plays out. But yeah, I am kind of curious, like what type of arguments are that they're going to make to overcome this stuff.
Well, the thing
Um,
is, everything he's saying is just the bulk of it
right,
is either factually inaccurate or it's just based on hypothetical phone calls that happened. Like if you read through his arguments, it's just like, I called Jace and Jace said he doesn't care to interview witnesses.
right,
But you can't unless he has a recording of that phone call. It's just what Mitchell says. And then Jace Hall, just because he's saying he doesn't care about the witnesses doesn't mean he's not willing to interview them either. Because I
right,
fully believe that I mean, we know that all the contact information that Twin Galaxies had for the referee and other people, they did contact.
right,
Uh, so there's no evidence to suggest that if Twin Galaxies was provided with witness contact details, uh, they would have not contacted them. And I personally believe that while they're not really relevant because we're not talking about the performances at all, Twin Galaxies is talking about the videotaped performances,
yep,
which are completely separate from any live performances. And it doesn't matter what, like I said it in my video about Billy Mitchell. I gave the example of Ben Johnson at the Olympics,
right,
where Ben
yeah,
Johnson did set a world record
yep,
in the 100-meter sprint. And but then that world record was stripped 2 days later because he was found to be doping.
sure,
Now, a similar exact same situation where he had millions of witnesses saying that he did it, but that doesn't mean he didn't cheat. And if he were then to get a witness testimony from everyone who was there, that doesn't help his case in any way, shape, or form. So it's not, the doping commission would not be expected to interview all of the witnesses that saw him do it, because the only evidence that really matters in that particular instance is the blood test. So unless the witness was saying, the blood test was gathered in a, incorrect way or whatever.
right,
But if it doesn't relate to his blood, then it's not relevant to the accusation of cheating. Um, and that
and
kind and yeah, so there's no real evidence that Billy Mitchell has, like hard evidence that shows that Twin Galaxies was not willing to interview. Just that Twin Galaxies said they're not that pertinent to our conclusion or our investigation.
right. Let's see if we can you help me understand how the reviewers
Mhm.
determined the tape to be made on an emulator, because that is uh i- that I think is going to be a critical thing that the Twin Galaxies is going to focus on. It's like, we said that he made it on an emulator because he did, because of X, right? Like they're going to
Mhm.
have to tell that story. And that's going to get to the core issue of this idea that they're accusing him of cheating.
Yeah.
Um
So
which
obviously,
I don't think they do, because technically, if I'm not mistaken, there was an emulator category but Billy submitted his score for the original PCB category, and Twin Galaxies just saying, we're not even saying that these scores are invalid, just that they're for the wrong category, right? Like that's kind of a state. Did I see that
yes.
somewhere, or am I making that
So
up?
that's why Twin Galaxies never said that he cheated. And there's multiple reasons why you can be banned from Twin Galaxies. One is cheating, but another reason is just misrepresenting. So you can get banned, and Billy Mitchell says that Twin Galaxies banned him. Therefore, that is a tell that they are claiming that he cheated because they banned him. But
Right.
there's plenty of reasons that you can be banned.
Yep.
I mean, one of the reasons you can be banned from Twin Galaxies is by having copyrighted music in your submission. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So, there's tons of different reasons. It was the misrepresentation of saying that it was arcade, but it was actually not. And so the way they can tell that is by in Donkey Kong, when a level begins, it is drawn on the screen in a particular way. And the
Right.
way that the graphics are drawn is different between emulation and arcade. So arcade, is done like a swiping motion from side to side.
And that's because an arcade machine, does it have to do with the physical CRT of the arcade machine?
Nothing to do with the CRT at all, because the direct recordings don't go through the CRT. The direct recordings go directly from the board. So it's the way the board itself renders graphics on the screen.
Yep.
And it renders differently to what an emulator does, which renders through a computer. And the way the computer draws the graphics is different. So you can actually slow it down frame by frame and actually view how it's actually rendered.
Sure.
And it's completely different. So
how does the
Hmm?
video that Billy used differ from the sort of swiping rendering that's done on the original board?
Well, it's hard to put into words because it's a visual thing, you know?
Sure.
It's just certain elements appear at different times.
Okay.
So
it's not as simple as like, it's not as simple as in the original it draws every pixel on the left, and then in a column it draws them to the right, whereas in Billy's video it draws them, you know, from the sides going in, from the end going out, or top down. It's not that simple, right? It's okay, so it's a little more complicated.
Yeah, there's specific girders, well, for the barrel stage. I mean, there's different ways it's drawn for every single stage. But there's different elements appear at different times. You know, let's say it takes like 5 frames or whatever for the thing to draw.
Right.
Maybe on the first frame, it'll have X amount of girders on arcade, but on emulation there might be only 3, like, you know, 2 less girders drawn on that frame. And then every sort of frame introduces different elements, and the elements that are introduced on different frames are going to be different between arcade and emulation.
Gotcha.
So it's easy to understand when you actually see it, but it's very obvious. It's very obvious. It's when you go
frame by frame. So what Twin Galaxies has to do if they get in front of a jury is they have to show the arcade game frame by frame with a side-by-side comparison of Billy's video frame by frame, and just say, here is how it should load, here's how it did load, and this is part of it.
I don't think they need to do that. Okay. The reason being is that Billy Mitchell has literally said that the footage that Twin Galaxies has is MAME.
Oh yeah,
so he literally said that.
That's the conspiracy thing, right? Where he says,
yeah. So what he's saying is that there's a conspiracy that
someone doctored his video.
Yeah. So he's saying that the footage that they have isn't me, and if they got the original tapes or they got whatever, they'll see that you know, when they see the original footage, that will exonerate me. But he never provides anything. He never provides original footage. He never provides what he says that he had. So, and his conspiracy theory is that in 2009, there was a guy called Dwayne Richard.
Right.
And he's saying that Dwayne wanted to frame him. He had a vendetta out against him. So what he did was he took the original game, and then every single transition screen, he like doctored it to make it look like it was emulation. And that's why the tapes that they have is showing that, and they're not the originals. They've been, it's a frame job. It's a conspiracy in that regard.
It's a frame job. That was a good pun. Frame job is a good pun.
Yeah, it's a frame job. So
that sounds really.
He has no evidence for that. His evidence for that is, but I didn't cheat. So obviously the tapes that show that this different footage can't be mine because I didn't cheat. Like that's literally his evidence there. But we know that the tapes are his, and we have a whole bunch of reasons for that. So, like I said, Mitchell said that the tapes were doctored by Dwayne. The tapes were doctored by Dwayne Richard, who got them in 2009.
Sure.
But the thing is, we have footage of the tapes from the King of Kong documentary, which was recorded between 2004 and 2007. Right. We have footage of the tape from Twin Galaxies' head referee at the time, Robert Merchek. He did an MTV interview in 2006 where he literally showed the tape of the performance, and he's like, this is Billy Mitchell's performance. And, you know, this is the kill screen. He talks about it. And in that footage, you can literally see the same proof That's
Okay,
not arcade, it's emulation.
that was my follow-up question is, okay, so you've got the footage from the other things, but is the footage presented in such a way that you can see the different drawing? And then
Yes.
now here's the question.
And then, sorry, just to follow up.
Oh yeah, go ahead. Yep.
I'll give the full evidence here.
Yeah.
So they have those two. Then they have a performance given to them from Dwayne Richard, and it's exactly the same, matches. And then they have another copy that was from Richie Knuckles, who was who actually gave the footage.
I'm never gonna get over that guy's name. It sounds like a 60s mobster.
Yeah, he wanted to exonerate Billy Mitchell, and the reason why he sent the footage to Twin Galaxies, and in the actual text messages between Richie Knuckles and Twin Galaxies, Richie says, don't accept video from Dwayne Richard because he wants to frame Billy Mitchell. I've got the real footage. I've got the real deal that I know that he didn't come from Dwayne Richard. And then he sends that to Twin Galaxies, which matches exactly with what Dwayne Richard has. It matches exactly with the King of Kong. It matches exactly with the 2006 footage. All of these sources match exactly with each other. It's just, by this point, it's like too overwhelming to say that it's not Billy Mitchell.
Have you considered the possibility that you can't trust a man named Richie Knuckles and maybe he's in on the conspiracy?
I thought you were going to say, that meme, the aliens meme.
Oh yeah. Aliens.
The guy with the
guy,
yeah. I thought you were going to say that.
No, okay, so here's a weird scenario, I guess, a possibility.
Oh, so my whole point of that rant was that.
Yep, go ahead.
And Billy Mitchell said that the footage that Twin Galaxies had was MAME.
Right.
And that's the same footage that matches with everything from the King of Kong, 2006 with the head referee. So he's literally admitted that the footage is MAME. And that's why I don't believe that you even need to prove that it's MAME, because it comes from the plaintiff's mouth himself, who has admitted already that it's MAME.
Gotcha. Okay. So then, yeah, and then if he's admitted that it's MAME, and he just says, well, it was a conspiracy against me, that's a completely different claim than defamation. Because if he says,
the thing is, he made the defamation claim before this 2006 footage came out.
Oh, okay.
So gotcha. This 2006 footage came out after he filed the lawsuit, and now you can't.
So now here's
can't really get out of it.
What if? Oh, I was going to ask about. Okay, so you mentioned all these different sources of footage that can be reviewed. Is there any even remotely possible argument? I'm not saying there is. I'm genuinely asking that says that the way that we're replaying the video, or that the video is being gone through, that it changes the way that it appears from the original. Is there any possible way in doing that?
No.
Okay, so
it would have to be the case for every single version and every single method. There's just too many copies. There's too many ways that we've got the information, and they all match. So it's literally impossible. And we've got versions coming from a video camera pointed at a TV, which is the King of Kong versions. But we also have the King of Kong DVD has bonus material showing direct feed. So direct feed is coming straight from the VCR.
Right, and that's because I was gonna say, if I'm on a jury and you show me a recording of a recording, I'm gonna say, okay, well, but in that recording there could be some weird artifacting or delay, because recording a CRT just doesn't work very well in general. So if I were Billy's lawyer, I would say, yeah, that's an artifact actually produced in the subsequent recording. But you're telling me there's, on the DVD features, there's direct feed. So we've got these coming straight out of the VCR.
Yeah. And one of the big things about the Twin Galaxies investigation was getting the equipment that Mitchell claims that he used to record the games. And they've done everyone's done heaps of testing, trying to get, and even Billy Mitchell, his sort of team of experts, spent tons of hours trying to see if they could create the same artifacts through an arcade machine. But they're unsuccessful in doing that. No one has ever produced the same artifacts through arcade that is shown on his tapes. I mean, there's just thousands of attempts, so much evidence. Basically, we have the entire history of documented, recorded Donkey Kong games on arcades, not a single one has ever produced anything remotely similar to what you see on emulation. At this point,
Right.
it is like completely proven that
So,
arcade
oh,
cannot produce the same thing.
so my question then is, why are the emulators so bad?
They're not bad.
No, it's
Who says that? You mean as far as why would that result in
why
him being
why
like
haven't they
cheating and
why
being
haven't
banned?
no, I'm just saying, why haven't the emulators fixed the draw problems? Like, why don't they
Well, they're not
look like the
problems. They're
original?
not problems because they don't affect the gameplay at all. It's
Sure.
literally just the transitions between screens. So when a screen's loading, in
Yeah.
actual gameplay, it doesn't affect the gameplay. It doesn't affect any of like the mechanics of the game itself. So there's no reason to try and play with that because it doesn't affect the game in any way.
Gotcha. Okay, so then what about this crazy hypothetical? Let's say Billy
Mhm.
shows up, or well, in Discovery, it turns out that he has a copy of the tapes, right? You have
Yeah.
to imagine that he's got his own copy of his own tapes somewhere.
No, he doesn't. I don't think. He would have presented
Damn it, Billy!
Yeah.
But yeah, so what if there's some, like, maybe it's in a secret vault under an ocean? I don't know.
Sure.
He comes into court and he's like, okay, here's the tape. And he plays it, and they go frame by frame, and it's actually the legit thing. Like, what happens at that point? Because oddly enough, that doesn't win him the case, right? Like, because
based on the evidence that were available at the time,
right, if
it's
they're
not
saying
defamation.
these tapes show the MAME emulation, and
Yes.
and so that's invalid. And he says, but I didn't cheat though. So that's why this case is so fascinating to me, because it goes both ways. There's a weird scenario that plays out where Billy didn't cheat, but he loses the case. And then there's another weird scenario that plays out where Billy did cheat, but he wins the case. And then there's the normal scenario that's going to play out, which is he wins or loses, and we never find out anything, about the...
Yeah, well, the thing is, even if he did
beyond.
get the scores legitimately, even if he did do a live performances of each of these world records, what Twin Galaxies said is still correct. I mean, the tapes don't show original play on an original board. So, yeah, he could definitely have gotten the scores legitimately, but still be banned, and it still misrepresented what was on the tapes themselves, because, maybe the tapes were produced at a different time. Maybe the live performances, were done, but the performances weren't the ones submitted to Twin Galaxies. But all Twin Galaxies can do is use the concrete evidence and tapes that it has. So if Billy Mitchell has some other secret tape that exonerates him, that's completely fine. And if he were to present that, then Twin Galaxies would need to consider that. And Twin Galaxies has said, if there's new evidence that came out that exonerated him, Twin Galaxies would be completely happy to, consider that and investigate that. And if it was proven that he didn't cheat, he would be unbanned, and Twin Galaxies would, make a new statement. But I mean, it's not like Twin Galaxies is like, your chance of defending yourself and proving yourself legitimate is over. I mean, that's not the case at all.
Right.
They're always willing to accept new evidence.
Sure.
Always happy to examine any new arguments that might come their way.
Although that's kind of a point in this lawsuit, though, isn't it? At least Billy alleges that they said that he submitted evidence outside the window to respond, and that was why they didn't consider all of the witnesses or whatever. Like, they said he had a chance to participate.
Elliot Mitchell saying that?
It was in one of the early filings, if I remember, that there was that Twin Galaxies basically said we had the public review time. He didn't participate in the public review time.
Yes.
So therefore that. But you're saying,
but I mean that's the statement. So that was before the statement. But there's still, as far as him being banned and all that can still be reversed anytime.
Okay, sure.
As long as he provides evidence that he didn't cheat.
Okay, next, I have one more question for you, I guess, about this thing, and then we can start wrapping up. But do you think that okay, so Billy Mitchell you're pretty sure he's not going to settle out, right? Based on what's gone on so far, unless there's some.
I think he's in it to the very end, I think.
Sure. Do you think Twin Galaxies at any point? What do you think their their settlement line is. Like, because you mentioned that there's basically an offer for a no money settlement. Everybody walks away at this point. We've incurred our own costs. We go our own separate ways. We don't say anything about it, and that's it. But that was passed up. Do you think that that Twin Galaxies now will be entrenched? Like, do you think that there's something else? What do you think would?
Well, I think, from Twin Galaxies' opinion and from the opinion of anyone who knows anything about the case, the chance of Billy Mitchell actually winning is extremely tiny.
Sure.
And I think from Twin Galaxies, I can't speak for them, but based on my opinion when talking to like Jace Hall, for example, they offered, like I said, they offered in good faith to walk away.
Right.
They gave that opportunity. Like, their conscience is completely clean. I don't think anything at this point. I mean, I can't speak for them. I can't see anything preventing this lawsuit to go the full length at this point. And if I don't believe that they're afraid of it going to court or whatever. Just because if you actually look at the evidence, look at the facts, when everything's considered, I mean, it seems very ridiculous.
Yeah, from my view of it, it looks like, especially with your clarifications, which are very helpful. Thank you. It looks like Twin Galaxies has the case. Defamation cases are already really difficult to win in general. And they seem to have the evidence. The weird thing is, the biggest thing going for Billy, I think, is just how badly this has ruined his reputation. I think that's actually the biggest play for him, is how much damage he's gotten from it. Because, I mean, his name is entirely trashed. If you mention, like, Billy Mitchell anywhere, it's always funny in the comments.
The thing is, isn't there some legal thing where he intentionally put himself in the spotlight?
Oh, yeah.
With his scores, So
yeah, I'm not saying that that's. I'm just saying, like, that's. What's weird is that that's like the most meritorious part of his case. It's not that it has actual merit. It's just that he doesn't seem to have merit for his actual claims. But it's just like, when you look at it, you go, man, the way people hate this guy, you almost think it's like, there's got to be something, right? There's got to be some redeeming thing, or there's got to be some misunderstanding. Because he's just so, like, whenever I do a video on it, there's so many people who are just like, who hate him. And it's always interesting. But.
Well, I mean, he has his defenders as well.
He absolutely does.
But the fact his litigate, like, what do you call it? The fact that he's suing everyone doesn't help him. I think that's the main issue. But yeah, the way I look at it, I mean, if you look at a percentage of the population who actually sees, looks at the evidence and all that kind of stuff, it's like the overwhelming majority of people see clear as day, or believe clear as day, that he cheated. And should I clarify what MAME has to do with cheating? Like, why would that be actually cheating?
Yeah, sure. Because I don't understand.
People ask me as well. They're like, well, they post comments saying, so what if you used emulation? Like, you still legitimately got the score. Like, what's the problem?
Sure.
And again, it's all speculation, because you can't prove how the videotapes were created exactly.
Right.
That's something that you can't prove. You can prove what they're not.
Yeah.
You can't prove what they are. So they were generated.
If I'm not mistaken, that's kind of the problem. Is not only that they can't replicate the particular draw pattern and artifacting that occurs with an arcade machine, it's that it hasn't been replicated anywhere else either. Is that correct?
No arcade can produce that.
But I mean, in like the public review of it, has anybody been able to reproduce the draw patterns or whatever the issues? Okay, so they have done that.
MAME. Okay, it's but the thing is, there's different versions of MAME,
right?
And how was MAME played? Did he play it legitimately on MAME, or did he cheat? And the way you can cheat on MAME is by sort of using state. Do you know what save states are?
Yeah, that's where, like, I set up a hotkey and I hit it, and then it saves that exact frame and all the data, and I can go back to it whenever.
Exactly.
So I
Yeah.
can
So
do
what
a
he can do is
perfect run,
he can
basically.
yeah. If the level doesn't go well, he just starts it again, but it saves all of his inputs. So then he can run the whole thing back, and it would look like he didn't use save states because it's just sort of he's crafting a run. So in speedrunning, we call that a tool assisted speed run,
Right.
where you manually craft like the best run that you can, and it saves all of the inputs, and then you just run it back. And then so you can run back that whole thing and then record it to video and say, this is what I did. But it could have taken him 1,000 tries of each level to actually do that. And there's very good circumstantial evidence to suggest that he had to have done that. And one of the more telling things is his performances in what's. Have you heard of the Kong Off before?
No.
No. Okay,
But I
so
want to.
Kong Off. So after the King of Kong documentary came out and Donkey Kong became popular,
Right.
there was a competition set up called the Kong Off, where all the best Donkey Kong players in the world come together and try and get the highest score over a weekend. And
That sounds
for
real
many
nerdy.
years,
That sounds real nerdy. I love it.
it is, yes. And Billy Mitchell was part of that for many years.
Sure.
And the thing is, this is around 2010 where it started, where he is claiming one of his world records. But in his actual real life performances, he did terribly. So if you actually compare him to other top Donkey Kong players at the time who didn't have the world record,
Right.
they were doing much better than Billy Mitchell. So in all the years, Billy Mitchell never performed well in any of his live performances, comparatively to other players. So he was never really that good. And when he started streaming again, it took him like 2 years of just almost every day streaming Donkey Kong for hours to match his scores that he claimed 10 years ago. So there was, up until very recently where on Twitch, he actually does perform okay, still very low relatively compared to the top players. So, I
Right.
mean, you've got players getting 1.2 odd million and he's still below 1.1 million and he's not anywhere near the top 10. Like he's not like comparatively to other top players. He's not special at all. I mean, people say, yeah, but he's a terrific gamer, but there's no evidence that he's a terrific gamer. I mean, he's just not good relative to the other top players. And so if you look at his real life verifiable performances, they've never been anywhere close to his performances that he's claimed in these videotapes. So likely what happened was either he or someone else did use save states to construct a very good game, and they played it back and recorded it to a VCR and then submitted that as evidence. And then, yes, he does have some questionable characters testifying on his behalf saying, yeah, but we saw him do it live, but there's no footage of it happening live. There's no actual evidence of the scores being performed live. It's all sort of witness testimony from questionable people. So that's the circumstantial evidence to suggest that it's not just he played it on MAME, but he actually crafted a fake run.
Okay.
And said that there was a legitimate run. But
That
that's not
was,
the Twin Galaxies stance. Twin Galaxies doesn't say that.
So
Twin
I
Galaxies
can't.
just said it's not arcade, which is enough to ban him.
Right. Sorry, I'm trying not to cough, but I swallowed something wrong, which is annoying. So that I assume then that Billy's fans felt the same way that I felt when I found out that Super Mario 3 speed run where the guy like never touches the ground was that was created on an emulator, right? Like that's a tool assisted speed run. And my entire world was crushed when I found that out because I thought some guy actually bounced around for like an hour, for like 5 minutes.
Now, though.
Oh, do
humans
they?
they're now doing it. Yeah.
Oh man. Well, I think that about wraps up the Billy topic.
We do address one thing though, which is the question that I asked, which was the role of courts in dictating how governing bodies should or shouldn't investigate internal issues.
Yes,
I feel like this is a bad precedent where the authority can say, we think this is relevant and not relevant. And the court is going to come in and say, no, you have to investigate situations like this. And we're going to rule that by court.
Okay, so I think you're drawing this from the words in the judge's opinion, right? Where he says that Twin Galaxies has provided or has said basically that they investigated this thoroughly, but they haven't provided any, any support for why their investigation would preclude them from a claim of defamation. right? Like that section of the opinion. Is that what you're talking about?
Yes.
Okay.
Well, I mean, just I'm not sure exactly if that was a direct relation to what I actually think. In principle, does Twin Galaxies have to actually advise why they did or didn't investigate things in a certain way? Like, do they have a responsibility to explain their investigations to a court when Twin Galaxies is an authority on high scores and the court isn't? So
Right.
why does Twin Galaxies have to defend their own investigation to a court?
I think in this particular case, at this particular point in the case, the judge is just indicating that they made much of the fact that they did an investigation, but what they didn't do is provide any legal authority for how that would, I guess, make them not liable for defamation at this point in the case. And again, we're at that. They're using the argument of we did a thorough investigation to get past the very preliminary idea of an anti-SLAPP motion pre-trial, and they didn't provide any case law that says that, look, if they did a thorough investigation, then it should be presumed that they, exhausted all this stuff. So they weren't able to provide any authority for it, and that will be. Their expertise, I think, will be a very relevant question as you go into the trial aspect of it. And so I would caution that you may be reading too much into that sort of section from the judge. But on the other hand,
ultimately, if the jury would decide it anyway. So why would a jury have authority to dictate to Twin Galaxies how they should or shouldn't investigate internal issues?
Well, it all comes down, I think, to the malice standard, the actual malice standard, which is, did they have a reckless disregard for the truth? And the way that tends to work in an investigative capacity. So for yourself, for example, you're a journalist, right? So let's say that you have developed a standard for how you investigate a claim. So you hear about a new speedrunner. We'll call him Darkside Bill, for example. And just kidding. Yep. And he puts up a score, and everybody says there's no way he can do it. And you've clearly laid out like how thorough you are in investigating someone like Billy Mitchell, the other guy who I'm never gonna remember that guy's name.
Todd Rogers.
Yes, Rogers. Todd Rogers. So you've thoroughly investigated him and done that for Billy Mitchell. You've done all of that. Now let's say you thoroughly investigate Darkside Bill, right? But when you actually do the investigation, you cut some corners that you would have otherwise done. So for, Billy Mitchell's video, you went through and did a frame by frame analysis. On Darkside Bill's video, you didn't do a frame by frame analysis, but you summarized someone else's analysis that you read on the web. You didn't verify it for yourself. Now, then we get to the idea of, like, you had a prior business relationship with Darkside Bill that went south. So maybe you're predisposed to not give him a fair shake. So then you say, but I did a thorough investigation. I did this and this and this and this. Well, you may have done those things, but if in every other case that you've looked at, you've had 3 or 4 extra steps, and those steps can maybe be pretty important, then maybe you did recklessly disregard. You kind of overlooked some possibilities there. Sure. So that's what they're going for, and that's how it plays out from a journalistic standpoint. I don't know specifically. One of your questions is, do I have any examples of sporting organizations being sued after they were banned for allegedly cheating? Off the top of my head, no, but I have to imagine pretty much every Hall of Fame has at least had threats of it for something like that, and probably athletics commissions in different states. But in regards to them, they're going to go through Twin Galaxies will go through the same sort of analysis if it gets that far. Can they show that the investigation that they did for Billy Mitchell, or that they facilitated on their forum, was the same standard that they did for someone else? It's not even, the interesting thing is, it's not even that your standard has to be any good. That's not really the court's role. The court's role is to determine whether you followed your own standard. So if you're a journalist for the New York Times, you've got to follow the New York Times standard practices and ethics that their investigative journalists go through. But if you're a reporter for the National Enquirer, you have probably a different set of standards for verification because it's a tabloid and it's more of a, there's some salacious stuff in there and it's not verified in the same way. So that would be the idea behind this. And I think the judge is merely stating that at the pre-trial level, they haven't done anything to say why their investigation on its own merits dismissal. But when they get to the actual trial, they won't be assessing the validity of the investigation so much as that they follow their own sort of practice. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, I mean, if you look at it in relation to other cases, other disputes in Twin Galaxies, they went above and beyond.
Right.
So,
and that'll be a gleaming point in their favor. Yeah.
Okay. That's good to know. Because there are tons of disputes, and a lot of them are just over and done with. Like here's evidence that's fake. Okay, quick investigation. But this one, because it was a high profile case, and Billy Mitchell's history of lawsuits was one, I think, might have been one of the reasons that they were very careful.
Right.
And even during the dispute, there were threats of legal action before they even came to their conclusion. So it was known, and this investigation just dragged on. Like I said, the actual Donkey Kong forum months earlier said it was MAME. But Twin Galaxies kept going for months on end.
Right. And so that'll, like I said, that'll be a good point in their favor. Like, not only did we go through our regular investigative procedure, we knew this was a highly contentious issue, that Billy had lots of fans. We've had a good, I think they could even say we've had a good relationship with him in the past. We wanted to verify this as thoroughly as possible. And so we actually went these extra steps to make sure. And then that'll go strongly against his. And maybe what they should have done in their motion paperwork, and this, the judge might have been giving them just sort of a little hint here, is had they established in their motion documents that they actually had gone above and beyond and brought in like comparative studies to it, they may have been able to make that case. Although I think still it's kind of unlikely at this stage of the lawsuit, since he's given so much deference for anti-SLAPP. But it's a possibility that would have helped him. But yeah. So was there anything else on Billy? But I think we pretty much covered it.
I mean, there's a lot of stuff on Billy, but I'm not sure how much of it is relevant or interesting. I mean, I covered a lot of stuff in my video. There's a lot of stuff about, Twin Galaxies showing lack of malice by extending the investigation when requested from the people who are working for Billy. So when they requested extra time to submit evidence, Twin Galaxies granted it.
Right.
And it was one of the things where that's what Twin Galaxies was saying for lack of malice, was that, yeah, but we requested extra time when his team requested it. And then Mitchell came back and said, but these people that requested the extra time weren't part of my team, so they never represented me. But then Twin Galaxies provided messages from Billy Mitchell saying that these people did represent him. So there's little lies like that where he said these people never represented me, but they did. And then Twin Galaxies shows the actual evidence. There's plenty of little stuff like that. But it's not that, I don't think it's that relevant or interesting, because at this point, because the judge has already sort of commented on what he found interesting.
Right.
So I think I just wanted to focus on, I mean, Twin Galaxies is always like, his live performances are irrelevant because we're just talking about the tapes.
Right.
And that's all good logically. But then the judge wasn't saying that. The judge was saying, but you didn't interview witnesses. I feel like it's important to address that still. Even if it's not relevant, the fact that the judge thought it was relevant enough to talk about, may as well address that.
Yeah, and it sounds like what they were not able to do there was they weren't able to clarify that we weren't assessing a live performance with witnesses, and the reason that it's the reasoning behind why it's not important. Like, he could have had all the witnesses in the world, and it wouldn't change for a minute what's on the tape, and that's what we were talking about, is what's on the tape. That's the only statements we've made about it. So That's definitely a point that they need to work on as they go forward and realize that they didn't convey that story well.
Sure.
But that's that's part of it. So
I think we've covered everything at this point.
yeah.
Did you have questions or anything? Did they come in during the show?
Yeah, we've covered most of my stuff. I was gonna ask who's your favorite like gamer to watch. I was gonna ask basic stuff about gaming, like what do you like to play these days? What's your favorite NES game?
I don't play anything these days because I just mostly work, and
Sure.
especially because I just had a son.
Right.
So
Congratulations.
a lot of my time spent, thank you. A lot of my time spent. I'm not gonna game at this point in time anyway. I'm just focusing on building my YouTube channel and working as much as I can.
Right.
I don't really, in the same avenue, I don't watch gaming, but my favorite streamer is Dr. Disrespect.
It's
you
not
familiar?
DSP.
No. I know him. I know of him, but I don't watch him.
He'll one day he'll pass Dr. Disrespect. I'm convinced. No,
But did you get questions in from chat? Did they submit any questions in during the?
Yeah, we have a couple to go through, and so I'll do that. I will say speedrunning has ruined one thing for me, and that was my buddy and I beat Battletoads 2-player on NES. We spent an entire like semester of college working on it, and then I watched like speedrunners play Battletoads, and I just start tying a noose. I'm like, come on.
Yeah, there was that one. Did you see the blindfold performance?
No.
Of the, you know the what's it called? The tunnel where you're on the thing that you're driving and you have to avoid the walls.
The turbo tunnel. Yep.
Turbo tunnel. Yeah. So he did that blindfolded.
Oh, okay. See, that everybody says the turbo tunnel is so hard, but like by the time you beat the game, you've played it so many times that it's actually fairly easy.
Yeah.
But yeah, I saw the Mexican runner do it one-handed, where he had the NES controller and I was like, come on, man, this isn't even fair.
Yeah. So when you speedrunning is never about beating the game, because when you actually learn speedrunning, beating the game is trivial. You know, it becomes completely trivial. It's just about how fast you can do it. So yeah, a lot of games that were difficult or scary or whatever, it just becomes so easy when you learn all the strategies.
Yeah. Okay, let's do these chats and then we can wrap up. New York Gamers Federation says #RacketsTax. Hope that phone call went well for the both of you today. Wink, wink, nudge, nudge. Okay. Super excited for the both of you guys. Here's to opportunity. Hey, for added fun, what's your electoral college final forecast? I don't have one. I'm not qualified to make that. I'm going to be watching the election, broadcasting tomorrow, but I have no predictions. Mercenary X says, it's an honor to meet you, Karl. You, Apollo Legend, and Summoning Salt are some of my favorite YouTubers in this category. Mind you, there's one other person who goes into the cheater thing. Why did Apollo retract his statement? What does Mitchell have on him? We kind of covered that. I don't know if you wanted to say anything else about it, but...
well, what specifically what he had on him was the misinformation that was spread in the videos, and also the fact that Apollo Legend pestered him in real life. You know, he went to see him and did things that were less than that. He had some questionable actions that would have shown possible malice, I think, was the scary thing. So for me, I've sort of just done videos on Billy Mitchell. I haven't gone and stalked him in real life or, you know, tried to annoy him, which Apollo Legend did. So that's why I think his case was a little bit different. Not saying that he would have lost, but it would have been a lot more dirty in the lawsuit.
It complicates things quite a bit when you get personally involved like that. S Black Duck says, it's an effing joke. Everyone who speedruns is a degenerate, and getting world records is the only way people can feel good about themselves. Speedrunning is the most degenerate act man has ever come up with. That was a quote. Godspeed, Billy. Dab on all these losers. There you go. The gaming.
Hey, I'm not gonna deny that too much. I mean, I think. I mean, now I feel good about. I've made it profitable. You know, so I think you can make it profitable, but in of itself, I always recommend not speedrunning too much. I always recommend a balanced lifestyle. Make sure that your real life is, you know, up to scratch and you're happy with everything. Don't waste your time speedrunning or playing games in general too much if it comes at the cost of anything else.
There you go. Wise advice. The Gaming Otter says, do you think there are other cheaters within the Twin Galaxy community other than Billy Mitchell and Todd Rogers?
Did he say speedrunning community?
No, the Twin Galaxy community.
Apparently. Yeah. Well, there's a lot of people from Twin Galaxies past that people say cheated and they're very questionable. You can't really trust too much of Twin Galaxies before they introduced a, a really strong evidence system like they have at the moment, where you have to provide hard evidence. There's a lot of strict requirements. Back in the day, there was no requirements. You just needed to have like a referee that said, yeah, he did it. And
Right.
there was tons of corruption, tons of liars as part of their referees. And when Jace Hall, the new owner, bought Twin Galaxies, he sort of started to change the way they've done that, and now it's a lot better. But they still have the same names on the leaderboards that were around from the past.
Do you think? Well, that was one thing I got from your Dragster video was pretty interesting. The Activision guy, he said those were scores at the time, verified by people at the time, using methods at the time. And I think
Mhm.
that's an interesting thing. Obviously, if we can verify someone cheated, then sure, you wanna correct that. But in the absence of the ability to verify someone was cheating, you have to just rely on the methodology that they used and work on improving it, because you can't
Mhm.
always be on a witch hunt of the past.
Yes.
I almost made it into, I think it was the Twin Galaxies book, and I just screwed up a little bit, so I didn't. But my buddy is the first Super Smash Brothers world champion.
Okay.
The tournament was held at
What?
Mall of America, I'm pretty sure that was the first one, and I think it was Twin Galaxies who did it, but I don't know.
Really? That'd be interesting.
It was the
What year was
video.
that?
God, it would have been very late 90s, very early 2000s. I don't remember the exact
It's
time
possible. Yeah.
Smash Bros came out, but
The thing is, it's not like Smash Brothers isn't like Street Fighter, where Street Fighter had a huge esports scene and they kind of helped to build the competitive esports scene.
right.
But I think Smash Brothers was never seen as a really serious competitive game
Oh,
until now.
it was the funniest world competition ever, because it was like mostly like 12 people from Minnesota and like 2 kids
Yeah.
from Nevada. That was about it. It was great. It was in the rotunda of the Mall of America. I ended up like 4th place because I got screwed over with the Yoshi level. But that's how it went. It was fun times. Also, the Gaming Otter says, ask Karl if he thinks there are other cheaters in Twin Galaxies. Nick, oh wait, that was a repeat kind of. Just Some Guy says, Karl, do you accept the science showing rough and tumble play is required for kids' mental and social development, and looking at screens hampers said development? If so, do you accept your parents' resistance to your hobby was wise rather than persecution? Damn, that's deep.
Well, rough and tumble play, from what I've read, is more crucial, like for toddlers and children to sort of develop social skills and all that kind of stuff. I mean, by the time my family was, combative to me playing video games, I was in my teenage years. Um, Most of my development was done already, and it just so happened for me that during my teenage years, because I said I was like antisocial and all that kind of stuff, and I had like self-esteem issues and was likely going through this heavy depression, and video games were sort of helping me through that. So I think at that time, if my guardians were more aware of psychological issues, they would have allowed me to continue to use video gaming as a crutch to get through the difficult times. But I don't think restricting children from, say, video games is going to teach them magically how to live. I
No.
think you have to actually teach directly how to live. I can't just say, it's not like if I don't play video games, I'm going to go out and socialize and learn how to be a great friend. Like that, those lessons have to be taught. Like, this is how you treat other people. This is how you do well socially. This is, like the golden rule and all that kind of stuff. Like, be considerate about others. You have to teach people that. You can't just teach them by restricting what they enjoy doing. That doesn't actually directly help them, in my opinion.
Yeah,
So if you had the two, if you restricted video games, but also replaced that with education and encouragement, sure, I think that's good. But if you just restrict and don't fill that void with anything useful, I think that's bad.
what do you think about sort of the idea that video games are educational, or especially like depending on the game, especially. But so for example, my kids play on their screens a whole lot. And
Mhm.
sometimes my wife and I have discussions about it's like, oh, is this too much or whatever. The other day I come downstairs and my son is rebuilding one of the maps from Among Us. And he's like 3D rendering it out in Roblox. And I'm like, what the hell
Yeah.
is this? I don't know how to do this.
Mhm.
And so I look at that and I'm like, he's learning 3D modeling. He's learning various scripting and coding things through Roblox and Minecraft and stuff like that. And I'm like, this is way beyond anything I use, and this might actually be useful in the future because these things are applicable beyond the game, right? So
Yes.
what do you think about that for like kids growing up and
Well, I
stuff like that?
think there's two different things to look at. One is like sort of emotional maturity and like emotional growth, and then you'd have to consider like the future profession and career. And everything's changing with technology and all that kind of stuff. Like, for example, YouTube wasn't a thing 20 years ago. So the parents of 20 years ago couldn't have predicted that maybe a child's action 20 years ago is going to help them become profitable in 20 years on YouTube, right?
Right,
Like for me, uh, I was made, and a lot of people were made to feel bad for playing video games. But now, like for example, for myself, I'm like within 2 years, I'm earning like 5 times as much as I did working a day job, just because I committed to following my passion, which has always been video games. And maybe if I was more like less pushed down as a kid and more like encouraged to just be a geek and whatever, then I would have done this 10 years ago and I would have been fully expressing my passion earlier and therefore be in a better career position now. And maybe the fact that kids are learning technology earlier is going to set them up for what's going to happen in 20 years, where they could fully take advantage of all that experience and knowledge to, uh, you know, earn money. But
right,
then on top of that, equally as important is the societal uh, lessons that kids need to learn about how to interact with other people. For example, like relationships, like uh, even sort of sexual relationships and that kind of thing. How do you set up a kid to be successful in that later on? It's probably not going to be through technology. It's going
right.
to be through human to human relationships. So again, I don't think just restricting the technology that's going to harm their career later on, I believe. But
Sure.
if you do want to restrict it in order to teach them important lessons about how to find your own happiness and how to develop positive relationships, that's perfectly fine. But you have to replace it. You have to directly teach that stuff as opposed to just sort of taking away screens. It still doesn't fix anything, in my
Yeah,
opinion.
that's not a solution. That's the
Mm,
removal of something you perceive as a problem. Those are two different things.
yes.
Uh, yeah, very, very nice. I like that answer. Just some guy also says, I only ask this because it seems really unfair to your parents to view them as having personally persecuted you in some way, when in fact their instincts were dead on correct about what was necessary for your mental and interpersonal development. Cheers. So that was just kind of going along with that
Well, I'm not
previous
saying that
question.
I never said that they're bad. I never said that their intentions were wrong, all that kind of stuff.
Right.
I think that their decision could have been based entirely on good intentions and what they knew at the time and all that kind of stuff. I'm not saying anything other than that, but I'm saying that given the progression of technology and all that kind of stuff, I don't think it was a good decision for me personally. And
Sure.
I think you don't have to be restrictive as a punishment in order to help a child grow. I don't think that's the solution. I think what is better is encouragement in what you believe is more positive, and direct education.
Yeah, I agree with you. And for example, for me, because narcissism. No, just kidding. I I think at times, our parents did the job that they had with the tools that they had, and in the world that they lived in. But our world changed really dramatically with the explosion of social media, and specifically like the career that you and I are now in, this idea of YouTube. Because I started out, I had always wanted to entertain people. Like I had always wanted to tell stories, write books, write short stories, stuff like that. Then I got out of school. That didn't work because I had to feed a wife, and it was like, this isn't going to happen. So then I went into kind of the corporate side of things. I hated it. I hated the day job aspect. I'm a lot like what you described earlier. The second you tell me something to do, I'm going to do the opposite. Please just don't. So that stuff all played out. And then now I find myself, then I went to law school or whatever, was a lawyer for several years. And then I found an opportunity to get into sort of this thing where I'm doing what I originally kind of wanted to do. But when I wanted to do it, this didn't exist. There wasn't an avenue to entertainment in the way that there is now. Back then, I would have had to go to New York or LA or Austin or something and try and hack out the traditional methods of entertainment. Now I can just do it from my own house. And same thing with you. Like our parents weren't seeing these careers being possible in 20 years, when they're saying, hey, you need to get off of that Nintendo 64 that you've been on for 8 straight hours and go do something. They weren't seeing the fact that you could actually turn that into a useful, profitable skill, because it really didn't exist. So,
yes. But it doesn't make them bad.
Right.
But I'm saying that now we can look back and think, maybe we as parents don't have the full information about what is going to happen 20 years from now. And I think restricting a child's inquisitive nature or restricting their curiosity for technology may not be a good thing. And it's something to consider. I mean, maybe I think that's what I think. I don't think restriction's good. I think teach them what you think they need to know as a separate thing. You can do both.
I
can
agree.
be fully involved in technology, and you can teach them how to get along with other people. They're not mutually exclusive.
I apologize for this in advance. Kermit the Frog says, "There I was, alone in Las Vegas, completely twisted on drugs, no cash, no story for the magazine, and on top of everything else, a gigantic goddamned hotel bill to deal with. How would Horatio Alger handle this situation? Stay calm. Stay calm." I don't. It's a thing. Kermit the Frog voice. Just some guy says, well, it is actually true. Children socialize each other. You actually learn how to be a good social creature through play. You also learn cause and effect. A lot of mental development is embodied, i.e. through physical activity. Not a bad take, though, Carl. And
Jordan Peterson is a big proponent of rough and tumble play with kids. So I know I've heard him speak on it, and yeah, I agree. And like I said, I fully agree with all that kind of stuff as part of their upbringing. And hopefully, I can learn how to do that. And I'm going to personally be studying like the best ways to do that. And I want to teach my kid how to socialize and how to learn those boundaries and all that kind of stuff. And it's something that I will also try and research more as the years go on.
I think your kid will surprise you in how well they socialize without like a direct sort of guidance. Like you just put them inside the situations. But that it's different for everybody. And then finally, from just some guy says, occurs to me to mention people high up in big tech are being very restrictive on how much they let their kids use things like screens and social media because they've presumably seen the consequences. But yeah, I assume they replace it with other things. Look, if you're high up in big tech, you can replace it with whatever the hell you want. You're making all sorts of money. Okay, Bad Vibe says, here's Twin Galaxy's issue, in my opinion. If cheating is an issue, shouldn't there be a verification process of the equipment prior to the attempt? Is that something that they've done now? I mean, Billy submitted these years ago. That's part of the other issue.
Nowadays, they require you to actually, do the performance and then show the arcade, show the board, go around the back, open it up and everything. Like, there's a full process that you need to do in order to verify that there's no funny business going on.
Mhm.
That wasn't the case when Billy Mitchell submitted his scores. So it has changed now. So it's not an issue moving forward. It's just the past records that are causing an issue.
Do you think live streaming is better for speed running? Like, is that does that make it harder to cheat and to do all this stuff? Is that
it makes it harder to cheat?
Sure, but there's still, I mean, you could still cheat live streaming, I suppose.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, that's why I think ultimately more emphasis is going to be put on live competition.
Sure.
Just like, esports and stuff like that. It hasn't got to that point now. Speedrunning's still, mostly done in bedrooms. But I think over time, the more and more cheaters come out and it becomes more and more difficult to verify. I think, it'll start to slowly move into live competition space.
That'll make world records a lot harder for people to break, right? Because you may be sitting there replaying the same level of Castlevania for 10 hours trying to get that extra frame or whatever.
I mean, world records, how important are they realistically? Esports don't rely on world records. They just rely on direct competition.
Right, that's true.
That's still massive, So I don't think moving away from world records and moving toward direct competition may not be a bad thing.
Yeah, actually, that's not a bad thing at all. And that's how the Olympics works, right? Like the Olympics, it matters whether or not you win at that competition. When you get a world record or whatever, that's just kind of icing on the cake.
Yes.
And it's verifiable because of all the stuff that's in play. So that's
no one says, well, he won, but he didn't get a world record, so who cares?
Right. Yeah.
Whoever wins is respected.
Bad Vibe says, secondly, considering the time of the achievement to finding the evidence, my question is what isn't it reviewed before awarding the achievement? And again, that's something that's just been, I think, as you were saying, that's been corrected with time. They just didn't have the same verification when Billy's tapes came in that they do today.
Well, they did. Well, you know what's funny is that another Twin Galaxies referee at the time who received Billy Mitchell's tape rejected it and said, based on this evidence, I'm not going to accept this score because of the issues with direct recording and that you can't prove that it was done on an actual arcade unit, unless you have the actual live footage.
Sure.
So he said, because of this reason, we can't accept it. And then, but the owner of Twin Galaxies, Walter Day,
right,
and this other referee, Todd Rogers, said, "No, we'll accept it because Todd Rogers said that he got it."
Gotcha.
So based on the actual hard evidence, it was rejected. It was only accepted because Todd Rogers and Walter Day accepted it based on witness testimony.
Okay, that's very interesting too. This story is so much more complex, which I love. The Gaming Otter says, hashtag Karl Jobst is innocent. Hashtag Billy is a cheater. Hashtag Triforce Johnson is also a cheater. Who's that?
Triforce is another person in Billy's camp.
Oh, no.
Yeah. So I don't even want to go there because I don't want to sort of incur more of his wrath than I would need to. And I don't really care about him. He's not as relevant.
Sure.
Because he doesn't have any famous records or anything. But some of the stuff he says is questionable. He's a big Billy defender.
Gotcha.
Let's just say that.
Tipster says, hey, Nick, tell my dear friend Karl that Tipster says hi and he has my support. There you go.
Thank you, Tipster. I appreciate that.
SeedFan85 says, about yesterday's Drongo, in Australia, there's a perception that idiocy sounds more legit in English accents and Murdoch's press is an election issue. I think he's talking about the video I reviewed yesterday from Philosophy Tube, which made me want to gouge my eyes out. The Gaming Otter says, if Karl needs money for a lawsuit, tell him I'd be happy to donate to Karl. Thank you, Nick. Hey, you're welcome.
Thank you. I appreciate that. The moment it hits the court, I'll probably start a GoFundMe or something.
Yeah, and we were kind of talking about that before the show. I don't know if you wanted to get into it at all because it is getting pretty late.
Yeah,
But
yeah.
but
We
yeah,
won't have time now.
yeah,
But
another day,
it,
another day.
yeah, another day.
Kalinka Pavlova says, "Hi peeps, Nick and Carl. I just found my uncle's old Ian Livingston fighting fantasy books. They are the 1983-84 editions. Imagine being nerdy then." Angry Baneling says, "StarCraft is greater than Warhammer. Facts. Get off of here, you heathen." Eddie Most 1000 says, "The idea behind code manipulation is reverse code engineering to facilitate results." Red Mage 13 says, "Carl, what in your opinion has been the most notorious story of a speedrunner being banned from GDQ or speedrunning in general?"
Most notorious. Oh,
There was someone who was banned from GDQ a year or two ago that I heard something about, but I don't know any. I think it was about like a socio-political sort of issue.
Yes, and I don't want to get into it.
That's perfectly fine.
Yeah, if that person is asking would know exactly what you're talking about, and I would say yes, probably that person. But I'm not interested because that they were an associate of mine, and just I don't want to say their name or get into it at this moment.
Yeah, no, that's fine. Eddie Most 1000 says, "Also, if Apollo was served in 2018, then he would have been served in Oregon. I grew up about 20 minutes from him." He wasn't served in 2018, I don't believe. I think
2009. No, it was 2000. Might have been this year. It was, but
I think
yeah.
it was
No, it
this
might have
year.
been 2019.
I think it was
Oh,
filed.
no, it could have been early this year.
Yeah, I think it may have been filed late 2019 or it was earlier this year, but I think he was served this year.
Yeah, it's because of the statute. Like it was because Apollo came out with his video in like February 2018.
Right.
So it was definitely probably the end of 2019 or January 2020.
Gotcha. Andrew War Snowboard says, "Billy could have had the greatest Bond agent, but Sean Connery is dead." So, Dr. Teeth says, "The radio station I'm stuck listening to here at work started playing Christmas songs at 9 p.m. on Halloween." I was in a store the other day and they had instrumental Christmas songs. And I was like, can it just wait? Can it just wait? Like, I hate if I have to hear that. What's his face? The Beatle. What's the Beatle? Not John Lennon. Paul McCartney. If I have to hear that Paul McCartney song, "Simply Having a Wonderful Christmas Time," this year at all, I'm going to have a bad day. Angry Baneling says, "Carl, did you speedrun any of the Souls games?"
No, but I'm very interested in learning about them and making some videos on them for sure. I love the game. I have played it.
Yeah, I played through the first one with the chat making fun of me the entire time. It was a good experience. But all right, man, that's the questions we've got. So I want to thank you for coming on. I've had a great chat. Nice getting to know you.
And yeah, I mean, thanks for the clarification. And once again, probably for myself, I need to be less presumptuous on legal standards and how the courts are going to decide these things. So yeah, even in this conversation, I was enlightened a little bit about not to take certain words literally and all that kind of stuff. So it was really great for me.
Yeah, it's our system's stupid, but it's what we've got. That's but yeah. Oh wait, Me No Say says all the GDQ events have become utter trash. They ban all the fun guys and have become uber progressive. Got big, got bad. So sad. So there you go. That was the last one. Well, like I said, thanks for coming on. I like to say goodbye to my guests in private after the stream ends. So guys, to the chat, go check out Carl's channel if you're not already subscribed. Go click that subscribe button, watch his videos. They're very good. And come join me on Twitch. We'll be watching something. I don't know what yet, but we'll be doing a Twitch watch party. It'll be a blast right after the show. Oh, finally, Bad Vibe says, okay, so based on that statement, the person in charge decided to allow it. Isn't that the same argument as current ownership banning Mitchell? I mean, I kind of. While I agree...
No, because this decision is based on evidence,
right?
When the other one, which is based on witness testimony, is the difference.
While I agree it's bad to cheat, maybe the pre-certification title be made. Well, I think they've resolved the issues that led to this in the first place. Like that's the thing. They've been changing the method. It's just when you're reviewing a score from 20 years ago, or 15 or 18 or however many it was, you're gonna run into stuff that you can't retroactively fix. And the question for the court, and this is a question for the court, will be, do the statements that Twin Galaxies made, regardless of anything else, regardless of whether or not Billy cheated, do the statements that they made about Billy's actions and the tapes, do they amount to false statements that caused Billy damage that they made knowing the falsity of the statement or with reckless disregard for the truth? If yes, Billy wins. If no, Twin Galaxies wins, and the court will tell us. So that's the fun thing about it. So, all right, guys, thanks for hanging out with us tonight. We'll catch you over on Twitch. Do you want to say any last thing before we go?
No, just thank you. Thank you.
Yeah, my pleasure. All right, guys, see you in a bit. Peace.